see furniture purchase, and Ron, you want to walk us through this? This came forward from finance tonight, and Northside's going to get some new furniture for the LMC through a variety of funding sources.
Yeah, we went through this probably in great detail at finance. Back at the start of the project at Northside, we had, much like we had at Parkside, we identified that if there were any funds remaining at the end of the project, we were going to use that for updating the library furniture and particularly the book shelving to make sure that that was done. Where we are right now is we have about $39,000 of contingency left at the end of the project, which we're trying to wrap up in June. We have some soffit painting and some doors and a few other things that are still getting wrapped up once school gets out. We're going to actually take, because we want to wrap this up in June and not let it fall into another accounting year, we're going to take some of our outside concrete projects that we were going to do at Northside, use the building funds to do that, and then it'll free up long-term maintenance dollars that otherwise we're going to be used next year. So that's where $30,000 that's identified for long-term maintenance is really just building contingency funds that we're going to use in June instead of carrying it forward to July. We have about $23,000 of interest revenue over the course of that project. Keep in mind that the interest rates were far different when we did this project than what we're looking for with the high school, and it was obviously also a much smaller project, so not as much interest revenue as we're certainly looking forward to with the high school. Northside, again, getting back to the question about some of the gift funding. Fund 21 is where gifts that go into multiple years get accounted for, where you're not going to use those gift funds necessarily in the same year that you receive those. And so Northside had some accumulated gift balances from over the years of $18,455.02 that are going to be allocated for this project. Much of those was probably previous PTO donations, but some of it could have been for other projects or donations over the years. And then they have the current year PTO donation of $15,838.98 that they'll utilize, and they'll use their building budget next year, $7,000 of that to fund the total project cost of $103,000. At this point in time, they're ordering the what they need. They know they need to get ordered and into the queue of $74,304, and they're still finalizing some of those other minor pieces, and so they'll bring that back once they get the rest of the order worked out in detail.
So, Rich, just so the board knows, I was part of the PTO prior to being elected and helped make the decision to donate these funds, so I'm going to abstain from discussion and voting on this one to avoid any conflict of interest.
Any additional questions or discussion about this item?
I would just note a special thank you to the Northside PTO. That's an incredible donation to the project.
Absolutely.
To the board.
Any other questions, discussion? Hearing none, if somebody would like to make a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Jim,
Second.
second by Phil. Motion is to approve the purchase of Northside LMC furniture from Atmosphere Commercial Interiors at an approximate cost of $74,304.22. It's recommended by the Finance Committee. Additional discussion or questions before we vote? I'll note that Mike's abstaining by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item is item G. It's informational support staff transfers. Let the administration to discuss.
Yep, so we just have a lateral transfer for support staff. Lizzie Babel from the District Administrative Center, so receptionist secretary, she's going to transfer to Monroe Middle School to be the accounting secretary to fill that position. And that was available due to a resignation of Callie Becker. So we're currently accepting applications for the DAC position, and we will be looking to sort through those about the middle of next week and then set up interviews.
Rich, can I interrupt for something procedural?
Go ahead, Mike.
gotten a couple messages here that the live stream's no longer going. Is this still being recorded to?
It's the internet that's popping on and off that's interrupting it.
Okay.
So we don't have control over that.
So it'll be posted later. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions on this item? All right, move on to item H, it's an academic update. Over to Todd for some good news about,
You guys should have access in your board docs to a slideshow with some data. End of the year, we're collecting end of the year data at all levels. I thought I'd share kindergarten through second, as we've made some pretty big changes over the last 2 years, and that's noted on the first slide there with the professional development that we've provided our staff. That will get finished up in June with letters training. I've talked about that previously. And then we are in our first year of the new ELA program. So obviously we're monitoring FastBridge data along with other data as we implement. So I just wanted to go through briefly a quick update with kindergarten through second. So if you take a look at kindergarten data, what this is showing you is a fall, winter, and spring percentage of students that are at the 40th percentile or above, which FastBridge considers low risk in terms of them meeting benchmark, them meeting grade level standards. So you can see on the kindergarten slide that they came in at 55%, and end of the year at 74% of students that met that 40th percentile or above. In comparison, this group of 4K kids, so the cohort of kids, were 52% last spring. So kindergarten had some really, really big growth this year. Our staff did a great job with implementation. Last year's growth of kindergarten was 58 to 65%, just in comparison. Different group of kids, but just showing fall to spring data. And then I have 2 slides there for first grade because there's 2 different types of assessments that those students take. So we have just the foundational skills, so it's reading sight words, it's segmenting, nonsense words, and then fluency is part of that assessment as well. Kids just reading words. Started in the fall at 49%, and they're at 50, so not as much growth there. Winter there is 42, and that's a better gauge of growth because in winter we start assessing students on the fluency assessment, where they actually have to read more than 1 sentence and they get timed, and they have to read a passage over 1 minute. So using the same assessment, the growth was 42 to 50% of students. We still like to see a little bit better growth in first. So that is a grade level that across the district, the trend is that that growth was not as much as kindergarten. So we'll be spending some additional time, not only in the buildings, but the district level, taking a look at that. Last year's growth in comparison, again, different group of kids, but they went from 41 to 48% proficiency. So pretty similar with first grade data. The next slide shows just the fluency CBM. That's a different assessment. And I put the expectations on there. For winter, they need to have 37 words per minute on a 1-minute read passage. In the spring, that jumps up to 66. Fluency becomes a big indicator, end of first, into second. You can see there, kids in the winter, we're at 40%. That's increased to 49% at the end of the year. And then the last grade level represented is second grade. There's 2 different assessments those students take. They take the fluency assessment as well. You can see the expectations there. By the end of second grade, they have to be at 101 words per minute to be benchmarked, to be considered 40th percentile or above. That group went from 49 to 55. And then the next slide represents a reading, which is more of a comprehension type assessment, multiple choice. You can see they went from 55 to 66. Pretty big jump up. And then I also listed on there Mastery Connect. In second grade, we start assessing students using Mastery Connect. And as we're doing that benchmark for the first time this year, we assessed 2 standards that were their power standards for the school year, which was 1 reading and 1 language. And you can see that they started in the fall at 52%. And by the end of the year, they were 82 for the reading one, and then for language, they jumped up to 86%. I'd say second grade overall with the different types of assessments that we've given have showed some really good growth across the board. And then I just noted at the end, FastBridge along with Mastery Connect data is used at the building level over the next 2 weeks. Buildings will do data meetings, they'll do reflection, review of the data with their grade level teams, do some planning for next year. And then principals, interventionists, school psychs, we're using that data to look at which kids fall into the 20th percentile and below, which are kids that we view as at least the first screener and needing intensive support moving into next year. So we're doing lots of planning and scheduling and looking at which grades have more kids in that category, so that can kind of help target which group of students are gonna need help to start the year next fall. So that happens at the building level. And then at the district level, like I mentioned with first grade, we'll take a look at like overall first grade numbers, look at trends in different buildings and trying to identify if there are certain grades that we need to dig deeper and take a look at. It's a quick update, but doing this work with all levels right now as we look at data at the end of the year.
Questions for Todd?
Is that a trend for first grade? Like, is this the first year you've been looking at this, or?
So FastBridge, we're in really year 2. We gave it for the first time during that kind of weird half during the COVID year. So I wouldn't say that's a real good gauge. So we're only in year 2 of giving FastBridge. The last year's trend looked pretty similar. Winter, there was quite a big dip because we added that fluency component in. You're asking kids to put together, obviously, those skills to decode words, and you're doing it in a minute, so it's timed. So there is that trend of fall to winter, which it drops, and then it comes back up, but not as big a jump as what we'd like to see. So it's something we're monitoring and taking a look at.
Okay, the first grade data just makes me nervous because you said it's 40th percentile is the,
40th percentile and above is low risk.
that's a lot of kids under the 40th percentile in the first grade.
It is. Yep.
So,
You're saying roughly half the first graders in Monroe are at high risk. Another way to read that.
There's some risk and high risk. So if you look at the color coding of that, there's a darker pink. That's high risk. So that's 20th percentile and below. And then 21st to 39th percentile is that lighter pink score there. And that's some risk. So, yeah, I mean, we'd like to see obviously more kids above that percent, that 40th percentile.
have you dug into root cause yet at all, or?
I mean, it's, you know, as kids come in, you can see on our 4K where they're at in terms of what skills they have, and we want to increase those skills over time. Some of the changes we've made with PD and providing more explicit instruction on some of those skills with our new ELA program are things that we looked at over the last 2 years and made changes with. So we feel good about the work. Our first grade teachers feel good about what they're seeing in the classroom. Obviously, we'd like to see more kids above that 40th percentile. We'd like to see kindergarten numbers across the board, K2. We have a lot of kids, obviously, that, a lot more kids in kindergarten that are above that 40th percentile.
So out of K2, K is the only one that met your goal for the year so far, right?
For the 10%?
Yeah.
Yeah, second grade I'd put in that category too, just because of the A reading. But if we look at just the fluency check, yeah, they didn't make the 10%. And we calculated that 10% based off of really what last year's data, what we had seen in terms of 1 year of data and what type of growth we saw last year from
Right,
fall to
and
spring.
if you're looking at second grade, though, middle of the year, it's only 64 to 66.
Yep.
And are we still doing FastBridge with our 4K students?
We are. Yep. So that's why I mentioned with that kindergarten group, last year, that cohort of kids was at, in the spring, 52% proficiency, or 40th percentile and above.
Where are our 4K kids today?
All the data isn't in yet.
Okay.
That's why we're still finishing up certain data across the board. K2 I had everything in, but 4K I don't have everything in FastBridge yet to be able to do the calculations.
Just one One quick comment and a question tied to the, because what is required to meet the 40th percentile shifts over time, then
It's a moving target.
it's a moving
Yeah.
target, which means that if you're seeing the percentages on these graphs go up, that means kids in those classrooms are making more than typical growth, right? And so I think that's important to recognize that it's possible to go down, right? Like that you would see many districts giving this type of test where kids would go down from the beginning to the end because they're not progressing at the pace that would be expected for a first grader or second grader. So I guess congratulations on that, particularly at the kindergarten data. Secondly, I'm just curious, and maybe you don't need to get into specific cases for this, but to what extent are we seeing variance by teacher? Right, like are we seeing some teachers just, 20, 30% growth, or is it relatively kind of flat across the board?
No, I would say there's some variances there, but I think part of that is also the makeup of the classroom, right? So you might have more ELL students in one classroom. That classroom's gonna look a little bit different. More special ed in one classroom. So I think it also depends on the makeup of the students in that room, where you do see some variances. But, without getting into specifics, we do look at that because we can target, by building, by teacher. And if there's a teacher that's doing really well, obviously we're looking at what did they do versus what their colleagues are doing in that building or across the district. And we do have some of that in pockets, certainly in K2, that we've got some data that looks a little bit better, so we'll go through that process.
And you look at it not only class by class, but also teams across the district, right?
Yep.
Which is probably a better example of what we see, Jim, is that there's some teams that are really effective, and then we try to make sure that we identify what's working and then generalize that across the district. So it's certainly something that's evaluated.
But I would say definitely the demographics in the building or in the classroom play a role in that as well, in terms of overall growth.
I don't mean to press you on that, but I would be very interested to double check that. Right, because I would hate for us to say, well, the demographics of a classroom are the determining factor in how much growth or what we would expect. And so if we run the data to understand, are we seeing outliers where a teacher, for example, might have a higher percentage of students in special ed or students who qualify for ESL, and they're making more growth than the district average? I think that'd be very exciting and interesting for us to see as a board, or at least I'll speak for myself, for me to see.
Yeah, it's a factor, not the factor, right? In terms of, it's certainly a factor, but yes, I think we have teachers that have, students in their classroom that might be a little bit more challenging for whatever reason, and they're doing extremely well, so I think that's a good point. I do want to mention on the growth, we can't calculate growth in terms of aggressive growth or typical growth or low growth when we look at FastBridge data. So we can dig into that too by grade level to say, did this grade have more kids that showed typical or aggressive growth? And that's another factor we look at.
Another factor is this is the first year of your curriculum.
Yes.
And usually you don't see a lot of growth until you're in year 3, 4, and 5 from a new curriculum. This is brand new.
Yep, that's a great point, Terry. I mean, I think typically you see actually a dip. You might see data come back down because you're implementing something brand new, and there's a lot of learning on the teacher side to learn the new curriculum, which it's been this year. So I think it's good news that we see, we see growth across those grade levels.
That's a testament to the amount of work that Todd and the staff has put into letters training and all the other PD. I mean, it's unlike anything I've ever seen in this district. And you talk to the teachers, that's by far the most intensive PD in terms of rigor and time that they've ever been a part of. But to a person, they'll tell you it was absolutely worth it. And that's unusual for people to say, yeah, that was worth all the time. And I think that's being reflected in the results. And to Terry's point, I would anticipate that we'd only see that continue to improve in the future.
I think it's worth acknowledging too that for our first and second graders, those are the cohorts that were most impacted by COVID learning losses. They were the groups that had their pre-K and first grade years interrupted. So this is likely the first normal school year for our first graders and our second graders. And some of the work, speaking for somebody who has a second grader, some of the work that those folks are doing is magical, is the only way that I can describe it. to have a second grader that starts school and cannot read to now is very proficient. Just the work that they did and the effort that they had to put into it to overcome those learning losses. It's pretty amazing. And I think some of the second grade numbers here do reflect that. All right. Any additional questions or discussion for Todd on this one? Thank you. All right. Next item on our agenda is the referendum discussion. So we're planning to take quite a bit of time. It's slated for about 60 minutes. It may run longer than that. We're going to take some time to discuss the current status of the referendum. We're going to spend some time with our partners. CG Schmidt and Baird are here. We've got Dan Chivonic and Todd is with him, and Lisa Voisin is here from Baird to spend some time with us. We also afforded, and the new board members had an opportunity to tour the high school on Friday and sit down and spend some time with CG so that they could get a little more up to speed and on par with the current understanding of the full board. So while we've got quite a bit to discuss, I want to work through this discussion in a defined order. First portion of our discussion will be updates on the current state of the litigation that was brought against the district and the board. I want to talk about progress on work already approved by the board back in November, including seeking an updated credit rating and progress towards long-term bonding. Discussion about what we can and cannot spend referendum proceeds on. Talk a little bit about that. And then discussion of possible action around setting a date for the meeting of the electors, if that's something that the board wishes to do this evening. Possibly to include the question of place before next steps to engage the community. So it's a whole lot that we're going to work through tonight, but there's some urgency involved in the work that's in front of us, and we'll get to why in just a moment. So first, just to cover and recap, in February, 4 plaintiffs in the Monroe School District filed a suit against the district and the board requesting that the court set aside the results of the November referendum. In March, the district agreed to pause referendum efforts while litigation that was brought against the district was completed, and I'm now able to share with you that the lawsuit brought against the district was dismissed with prejudice and the plaintiffs have waived appeal, bringing the litigation to an end. So now where we sit, referendum passed 6 months ago. Delays to the project thus far have totaled about $6.8 million worth of inflationary costs to the project. Those details are included in your board packets, and this essentially wipes out the investment interest proceeds from the bond anticipation notes that were obtained last November. Casting that forward as we work through the steps tonight, we need to keep that inflationary pressure run rate in mind at around $1 million per month. And I know that using that rear view mirror to determine a difficult to define future cost is not perfect, but it's what we've got. So I think that's what we need to use as an expectation as we have our discussions. So as each month passes, because we cannot exceed the approved referendum amount, the project would have to be reduced in some way. That means less facility and less opportunity for our students and community as those inflationary pressures eat away at the funds we have to complete the project. So with the litigation complete, we're able to move forward with the long-term bonding process. And that process needs to be completed by June 14th. With that in mind, the district has discussed with bond counsel moving forward without completing the acquisition of land because we would not be able to finish that by June 14th. Continued interest rate variability in the bond market is a risk to the total cost of the project, and the costs associated with extending or obtaining a new bond anticipation note by June 14th don't make financial sense either. So because our community is committed to renovating Abraham Lincoln Elementary and building a new high school, wherever that may be, administration is now acting on the authority granted by the voters and by the board to obtain a new credit rating and obtain the long-term bonds to finance the project. And that means that the financing and determining the location of the school are now going to be done concurrently instead of serially one after another. So we're separating those two. So with that kind of setting the stage, we're going to take a moment to talk with Lisa, and I'm going to ask you to give us an update on the process to obtain the credit rate, the new credit rating, and completing the long-term bonding.
That was a great intro, so thank you. I don't know if they have copies of my handout or not.
No, they do not.
Okay. I wasn't sure, because I know you guys have board docs, sometimes you can throw it on there quick, but it's kind of hot off the press, so.
I have a copy if you want.
Oh, okay. Do you want
We
to
can
just
just pass
take
them
one?
out.
Yeah,
Sure.
pass them down. Pass those. Make sure you guys have enough down here. Okay, so I'm super excited because you guys did a great job on our bond rating call last week. We talked to an analyst from Standard & Poor's for probably a good part of an hour. And we have been working very hard to create a 30-page prospectus or document around Monroe School District and the bonds. So this is what we provided to the rating agency as well as bond attorneys. It's still work in progress, but we're getting close. And it's really all about the bond issue and really a lot about Monroe School District, your finances, the local economy, your largest taxpayers, your largest employers. All of that data is in this document, which we provide to the rating agency. Okay, so, and then in addition to that, we provide a budget. We provide all of your policies. A lot of the board documents that you get around finances gets provided to the rating agency. So it's a laundry list of documents that we have been working to get to the rating agency. Then last week, we had the phone call with the three of us, and actually four of us from Baird, and then the rating agency analyst. I think there was only one on the call. Sometimes there's two.
I think there was two.
Okay, two on the call. So these rating analysts try to fill in the blanks, ask questions. You know, they were asking questions about your largest taxpayers and your largest employers and what the local economy is doing, and if you have growth and what your enrollment's doing. So we went through an hour, and again, you guys did a great job. They read into the administration. I mean, it's obvious you guys have the experience and the years behind you that you were able to answer these questions confidently and accurately, and it wasn't, oh, I'll get back to you. No, we had every question answered, and by the end, he felt very good. So your bond rating is an A+. That's what you have right now. That's a great rating for a district your size and it bringing on this kind of debt. So I'm very confident that we're going to stay at the A+ level. There is a chance we could get upgraded into the AA category, a chance. And I'm going to say slim because you're bringing on a lot of debt, and they see that. They see that. And they see the other piece was a little bit on the enrollment being a little bit more static to a little bit more declining. So we think we're going to find out Wednesday morning. We don't think. We are going to find out Wednesday morning, so we'll know what your bond rating is. Super important because we need that in order to go into the bond market to actually borrow money to pay off this note that you guys issued in December. Okay? So the handout, this is, you know, there were many steps before this, but it's basically where we are right now to the end. Okay? So the financing timeline does lay out that we had the bond rating call. We also have a due diligence call. Again, you guys did a great job on that as well, which is the legal part of this document. So talking to the attorneys about making sure every I is dotted and T is crossed in this document, because this is your document. This is going to go all over the country after we get the rating on Wednesday. So anyone interested in buying your bonds, whether it's a mutual fund, insurance company, money market, a bank, grandma and grandpa, anyone interested will have this document in their hands, and in the upper right-hand corner, it'll show your bond rating. So that's going out on Wednesday. So that's why I'm talking about begin marketing bonds this week. So what does that mean? We're just going to we have hundreds of bond salesmen that are at Baird that are all over the country that are talking to their mutual funds and the banks and insurance companies about Monroe School District. So as soon as that bond rating hits, they'll be on the phone. Okay. And then next week, right now we have it slated for Wednesday because Tuesday, right out of the gate from a holiday is not a good time to be in the bond market. I've been doing this 35 years and I know that for a fact. It's typically not a good day, but the day after is typically a good day. So we're gonna shoot for the 31st. We have flexibility. If for whatever reason it's not a good day, we can go the next. That's not we have a couple of days flexibility there. And what does that mean? We're gonna lock in your interest rates. So by the end of next week, you should know what the final interest rate is on this 20-year loan. And it will be fixed. Okay? So the financing plan is the next page. I know you've seen this many times before. What I'll tell the board is to focus in on is that middle section, which is what I'm talking about, the bonds. That middle section is your 20-year loan. Not super happy to say that interest rates jumped back up a little bit. They just did. We're pretty much back to where they were pre-referendum. So I will say the 460, that interest rate that I show there is conservative because I don't know where rates are going to be next week. But this is where we are right now. It's still right at where we were referendum time. Okay, so that would be the one focal point. A lot of this other detail on this financing plan, maybe the right-hand column which talks about the mill rate, you can see is going down. You know, every year over year, it's going to be going down in the future. So I think that's good thing to point out to the board. You're also going to start feeling the impact of state aid. That's important because your first debt payment that you make will be aided when you pay off the ban. That payment, the debt payment will be aided by the state of Wisconsin. So you're going to have an inflow of aid coming next year. Okay, so something to think about, and we can quantify that when we have more detail on that. So again, this is not final, but it will be hopefully by the end of the next week. We'll have a final interest rate for you guys. I wanted to show the third page, the interest rate trend. I just wanted to show you what's happened and why there's so much volatility in the market. This is 1 year. It's a 1 year snapshot, May of 22 to May of 23. I didn't put any interest rates on the left-hand side because what I want you to look at is the trend. It's, you can see right at the referendum time, we hit our peak. Right around that November 22, we hit our peak in interest rates for a 20-year bond, okay? It's come down. I put that red line in just so you know that's where we wanted to lock in, which would have been a really, really nice low point in that end of January, early February. That was really where we were gearing to lock in. It's always a good time to lock in bonds, and we've talked about this in January. So here we are, where that dashed line is. That's where we are today. Now, is it going to go up tomorrow? I don't know. Is it going to go down tomorrow? We don't know. But bottom line is we're pretty much where we're at when we were pre-referendum and estimating interest rates. That makes sense. Good? Okay.
Was there sorry, Lisa, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Was there an estimate on the possible interest savings over time at the desired point to lock?
Yeah, I have
From
the next
your,
page.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Perfect segue into
All right.
this week. You guys have seen, you may have, I know I've been working with Mr. Figueroa and Mr. Olson on these numbers where every time we had a significant event, like so pre-referendum estimate, I was right around that 450. And then in late January, early February, when it hit the low, we were down to 380. The interest cost differential was $10 million. I know it's
10.7.
Yeah, $10.7 million. Between, not that you would save that, it was just that we were super conservative pre-referendum and then interest rates dropped. Now we're back up to pre-referendum, so good thing we were conservative because we're pretty much there. So that's, the last page is just showing you the different points in time, and we've done, there were many more in between here, but I wanted to show you the key ones, the pre-referendum, where we would have locked in, and then where we are right now, okay? So I'll have a final one for this next week when we actually lock in the final interest rates. And I've invited the administration and board president to join us. Actually, any board member if you want to on Wednesday in Milwaukee. We're gonna go through the whole pricing, and you guys will kind of see how bonds get sold. And I think it's fun. Maybe it will be boring for you guys, but I think it's interesting. So hopefully we'll see you guys on Wednesday next week.
Can I ask a question as well? I know gavel went down, we can move forward, but are we in any jeopardy of any of these people that may buy our bond Googling this mess?
You know, it was interesting on the bond rating call. We, at the very end of the call, AJ Truckenmiller is the analyst name who I've worked with for many years, said, okay, well, we're, and he didn't ask any questions about any of the legal. And there was actually a question in the list that he had pre-sent us. So we reviewed it with him, and it's very clear and written out in the official statement, exactly what happened.
Okay.
We have legal
we
attorneys.
disclose that,
Yes,
nobody-
it's all disclosed,
Good.
and it didn't seem to have an impact, so far. And Disclosure Council helped us, write that disclosure paragraph, because that was super important, to make sure we had every I dotted and every T crossed, so far, so good. We'll see how next week goes.
Right.
Anything else? Anything, other questions that may?
What have rates been doing the last 2 weeks?
They were so stable. I think when I talked to you guys last, they were stable. They were just stable. And then just last Friday, Thursday and Friday, we saw that spike. And I think part of it is people are anticipating what's gonna happen with this debt ceiling usually first. So I think, but this is really what's been happening. So there was a lot of stability there for a while, and then they just shot up over 2 days. Now today it was stable. So that's a good sign on a Monday, let me tell you. So they're stable today.
Any additional questions for Lisa? Thank
Do
you
you
so
want me
much.
to stay, because I can, for the whole discussion?
If
Yeah,
like
if
to,
you don't
yeah,
mind,
that'd be
yeah. No
great, in
problem.
case any other questions come up
Thank you.
along the way.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. Okay, all right. Let's take now just a little bit of time to talk about what we're allowed to spend the bonding proceeds on that we just talked about, and what we're not allowed to spend them on. Those are determined by language in the referendum question that was approved by voters in November. We're going to talk a little bit about it based on community inquiries about remodeling or renovating the current buildings. And so because they were asked, we requested a position from board counsel at Quarles and Brady. They provided that position. So just real quick for folks as a reminder, this is the language of the referendum question. School building and improvement project consisting of acquisition of land for and construction of a new high school, including a performing arts center and site improvements, removal of the current high school and site restoration, capital maintenance and mechanical system improvements at Abraham Lincoln Elementary School, and acquisition of furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. So the ballot question does not include, and therefore does not grant authority to spend proceeds on constructing additions to or remodeling the existing high school. So if ultimately the community chooses to use the existing site, which can be done without a meeting of the electors, the entire existing footprint must be raised. None of it can be reused. So let's keep that in mind as we talk further about location tonight. And before we get into this next portion of the meeting, the reminder is that the intention here is to obtain background on possible sites as much as can be shared publicly, and to inform the next portion of our discussion about setting a date and setting a date for the meeting of the electors and engaging with the community. So the nature of negotiating with landowners is not something that we can do publicly and then approach landowners. Doing so puts the district at a competitive disadvantage. For that reason, and allowed by state statutes, the board, as 9 elected officials representing the community, are empowered to conduct that business in closed session. The board considered and investigated 7 sites around Monroe, and this is a process that we conducted twice as a board.
Do you want to have her put that one up?
Sure.
Jen?
Good time, and now I'm going to turn it over to Fig to kind of walk us through the due diligence that was used to narrow down to the preferred property currently under contract on County DR. And after that discussion, Dan and Todd are with us to answer questions about cost models for the current site and the site on DR, which were both included in your board packets. So go ahead, Fig.
Okay, thanks, Rich. So there's 14 identified sites. You can see them up on the display. And what we were looking at based on the information that was provided by the CG was we were looking for sites that had 60-acre minimum was the recommended size. So we could have most of our outdoor physical education activities and athletics on site. And also have space for possible future expansion for enrollment, either increase or decrease, where the building would have to house potentially 2 additional grades of students or grow due to enrollment increases. We were looking for something that had close proximity to city water and sewer, as well as utilities and technology infrastructure. because all of those cost dollars to move them to a site. Large enough that we can plan for separation of bus, student, and parent pickup traffic during start and end times, as well as when there are large events on campus, so traffic can move safely and quickly. Close access to major roadways with less disruption to local neighborhoods, especially around opening and closing of school and when bus traffic is coming in and out. Sites on the outside of the city offered the best future opportunities for housing development, and that was a community-wide aspect of it. And compared cost to prepare the site, add a lift station if it was required, do needed street improvements, and purchase the property, those would all be compared. So CG Schmidt and PRA, these sites were all identified in August, and CG Schmidt and PRA was on site. They were involved with the site evaluations. They were physically on the sites. We walked many of them. We drove on many of them. CG created the cost estimates around each piece of property based on their experience with many other districts in the state of Wisconsin. Hundreds, I would say. Is that accurate, Ann?
That's correct.
Okay. We also used a local civil engineer to do some preliminary testing on one of the sites, so we had less of a chance of surprises come excavation. All the properties were not engaged at the same level. There were some people that weren't interested in selling. There were some people that didn't return calls, not interested. So, and also once we started doing the breakdowns, some of the cost factors, it would put those properties out further out cost-wise. So we didn't pursue those, every single property. So, Jen, can you put up the analysis sheet? It's the one, yep, that one right there. Okay. So, due to inflation, time is a stress factor, which Rich mentioned earlier. Costs on planning, so if we're looking to, right now, the way we have costs set up, it'd be breaking ground in spring of 2024. So the estimates that we have right now are based on being able to break ground at that time. So additional time that goes from there has the potential to add possibly $1 million a month. So those are things that we have to take into account. So there's 7 properties on the sheet. It's actually two-sided. We spread it out. We did also put the existing site on here because it's something that we wanted to be able to have as a comparison. So 7 properties were looked at in depth and are provided for you on the site analysis sheet. We also contacted Menards to see if they were interested in selling their lot, and they were not. They said that they were planning to build here in Monroe, and that was all they were able to say. I know everybody's heard that before, okay?
Years and years.
Either way, they weren't interested in selling. We also, we had some not official conversations with the city property on Highway N and 81. And I think the city has that over north of the Alice project that they put in. And they were not interested in selling that either. So that was another possible site that we had some contact with. And then we did have a couple sites that the owners weren't necessarily wanting to go public with who they were. But, there's 14 sites identified on there, so. If you look at the sites, the first thing that's on all the evaluations are earthwork and excavation costs. And those were all done on a cut fill analysis. Todd, do you want to, or Dan, do you want to kind of explain what that is?
Yeah, so we take, using some preliminary information from the architect, we look at, grade changes through GIS data and then lay the building, preliminary building plan over that. And then take and see how much we're cutting in each area. So it's not perfect because it's not civil design, but it gives us an idea of how many feet earth we're gonna be moving to make a level site. That's essentially what the cut fill data is. So on all of the properties that were ones that were of the higher level, we did a cut fill analysis on. We didn't do it on every single property, but the ones that were high priority to the district.
Okay, thank you. So one of the properties that we have on here, there had been some earlier questions about it. It's the Kubley property, which is across 69 from the Menards property. And we did call, we did not get a call back, but there were a couple major hurdles on that, which is why we didn't proceed to pursue that. One of them was to try to get a a drive on Highway 69 on County 69. That's a $1.8 to $2.4 million cost. And the time it takes for the DOT to do their study, the required study, could be up to 2 years. So again, the time, the inflationary pressure, and then the cost. So what we did on the analysis sheet is, because we didn't talk to the owners, we don't know if they're interested in selling. We didn't, and if they were, we didn't know what they'd want. So I just had asked CG to put in a low cost, what our low cost would be and what our potential high cost would be, based on what we had for all the properties that we looked at around the city. So that's for that property. So with the budget is in the far left column on each side. Existing site, we have that on there. Of course, the existing site has all of the things except for land cost. So let's go back here. So you'll be able to see the associated differences with, and obviously earthwork, as Todd alluded to, it has a lot to do with the topography and then the makeup of the soils. A few of the sites had limestone ridges in them, so those would have to be cut to get level. So some of them had utilities right at the site or across the street. Some of the utilities were a quarter mile, half mile, or further away. So that either qualified or disqualified because of the cost to bring utilities. And then you can see the differences in those. So I know 4 of the sites would require a lift station for water and sewer utilities, and 3 of them did not, that we had on there. Street improvements were consistent. Most variation was about $209,000 for street improvements across the board. And finally, the cost to purchase is represented and totaled with the estimate cost to arrive at a total cost for each site. So of the 7 properties considered, the property on DR, the Donnie property, had the least expensive total cost for the project. It was also the top priority that was identified in August as the top property, but at that time, the cost was higher and could not be considered. The BNS property was contracted and shared with the community prior to the referendum vote, and with an added road to KK would have served well as a site for a new high school. So I was looking at this prior to, and actually Rich pointed it out, on the BNS property, we didn't have the extra road cost on here. So I know what the owners had said is they would donate the 66-foot easement, and then they would pay $100,000 to the cost of approximately a $400,000 road. So what it would add to that would be approximately $300,000. So just to make sure that that's on there. So our current site that we're sitting on, which is on the left of our document, it's the site the high school sits on now is 26 acres. There are 7 acres across the road to the east of the baseball diamond, across the street, and another 7 acres west of Abraham Lincoln. As an added option, after legal research was done for bond counsel, it was determined that if we weren't able to secure a site, that the site could be used as long as we didn't use any of the existing facilities. Let's see here. The cost comparison is on the analysis sheet for comparison. That site with those 2 pieces added would be about 41 acres versus 70 acres for a new site. Part of the past referendum includes $3.2 million for improvements and updates to Abraham Lincoln Elementary School. In an earlier survey, the community did not want to close Abe or raise it and wanted to have an elementary school on the south side of the city. Therefore, any new build would need to work around that elementary school campus. The total cost for the current site, next to the lowest price site, which is the site on DR, the difference would be $2,321,459, and will take an additional year to complete. Reusing existing facilities is not an option. We did research it. A new building and facilities would be required based on the resolution in the referendum. There's an executive summary of costs. Did you want to go through that now, or do you want to do that when I'm done here? The executive summary?
Yep, we can go through that next.
Okay.
You can tee it up right away.
Okay, all right. So we have some executives, we have an executive summary which has a breakdown and shows the costs and where things are at as of today for the current site and for the DR site. So, let's see. Due to the business office investing the bond proceeds, the district is expected to have 6.2 to 6.3 million in interest earnings, which must be used for the project. It's a good news, bad news. It's a good thing that we did it because it's very close to what the inflationary pressures were on the project. Good news, so the money is there to be able to use to cover that. If we could have gone earlier, we could have used it differently, but it's still there and it can still help offset the cost. Building on the same site would require our physical education classes, our outdoor activities, and our athletics to find different practice areas for a minimum of 2 years. Football, boys and girls soccer, boys and girls track and field, tennis and boys baseball. There would be no home events in those sports for a minimum of 2 years. Students will be attending the high school and elementary school in the construction zone because the school will have to be set up in there. So all the equipment's gonna have to be staged, the work is gonna be done while the kids are attending school. The community around the school will also have increased heavy truck and equipment traffic. Additional noise, dirt, and materials and equipment will be staged on site until they're no longer needed. Size of the property does limit the ability to address traffic concerns during drop-off and pickup times, and will be amplified during the project. Once the building is completed, this is on the current site, the students would move in and the old structures would be demolished before the construction of athletic and activity fields facilities could be added. So we're currently experiencing growth in our career and technical education opportunities for our students, and we have a robust partnership with Black Hawk Tech. They have a desire to work more closely with Monroe High School, and they also have a window in the next year and a half to improve their facilities and course offerings in a way that does not duplicate spaces either at the tech college or at the high school. The CTE area is in need of significant modernization to align better with workforce training and environments. So let's put up the drawing. So do you want to find the drawing for the same site? Okay. Right. So this would be an approximation if we use the same site. Again, it's a rendering. So in the drawing, the majority of the new school would be placed over currently where the baseball diamond and the current football field sit. Parking areas are around. The current building is in dotted line right there. The kids will need to continue to go to school there while the truck project's going on. This is not set in stone. None of this engineering has been done. This is the 7 acres across the road with a couple potential practice fields on it. And then if you look behind Abraham Lincoln, and then on the other 7 acres, there are a couple softball diamonds over there. So after the construction of the new school is done, and the other school, and when that's done, kids move in, that would be raised, and then the old structure would be taken down, and then the football track, soccer stadium, and baseball diamond, other outdoor facilities and parking areas in that part would be put in. So they'd have to be done in that order. So
Greg, what is the dotted line again?
the dotted line represents the current footprint of the building we have. Any other questions on that? Okay. Jen, you want to put up the sites? Now, the site that we put on the DR property is a similar rendering that we used on the BNS property as well. And it gets all of the pieces that need to be on there and gives us additional space for potential future growth or needs. So you can see both baseball and softball are on site. That's not going to interfere with any of the kids going to school while that's being done or their activities because it'd be on a different site. Again, it's by DR and it's by Highway 69, so it's near those roads already. And it's right across from Industrial Park. Utilities are at the street. So all the things that are needed are right there. So the difference in site preparation for the existing site to the Donnie site, like I had said before, the existing site would be $3,951,179. The Donnie property with the purchase of the property is $6,273.50. And then we're gonna go to the in-depth cost analysis, and then we'll be able to see the difference. It comes out to overall project about $1.5 million different. Is that accurate, Dan? Pretty close?
Yep, that's correct.
All right, so I got a couple more things to say, but it'd be best to do it after the site.
Okay, so, the board was provided cost analysis in their packets that Megan referred to a couple of times there. Those cost analysis cover the two options that we know we have available to us. One is an estimate for building a new school on the proposed county DR site. We already have that piece of property under contract, but it would need to be approved by electors. The second is an estimate for building on the current site, which, as a reminder, implies that the entire current site is raised, as we're unable to expend any of the bond proceeds on the existing facility. This also implicitly ends any notion that portions of the existing site could be obtained or cared for through a community partnership or organization, which I think was mentioned a couple of times.
Say that again.
So if anybody wanted to, if there was a community partnership or organization that wanted to step forward to maintain the PAC or the gym, they can't, because it has to be torn down to make room for the new facilities.
If it's on the same site.
If it's on the same site, yep. So the estimates that Dan has provided are worst-case scenarios. And we'll have him comment, but the current site estimates do not capture any possible proceeds from the sale of land or facilities, or if we move to a possible new location. They simply capture returning it to a green space. So that's what's in those estimates. While other options are possible that could offset those costs, we can't depict them in Dan's projections. So, Dan, do you want to walk us through those two, and then we can take questions from board
Which one
members?
did you want to talk about first? I'll have her pop it up.
The DR?
DR, okay, so that's option 2, Jen, if you can see that.
Is there any way you could make it bigger for people to see? And maybe it's not possible, I don't know. No?
It's on the screens right behind you guys, so it might be easier to turn around to look. It sounds silly, but that screen might
At
be
least you're
easier to
looking
see
right up
than
at a
this one.
TV versus at one ways away from you.
So the way we put this together was based on that conceptual drawing that we were reviewing earlier. And the way we come up with the cost at this point is we look at a cost per square foot based on typical buildings that we've built in the past. And we kind of have a range of where we go, and that's how we kind of determine that. So the first line item there is the actual building. So it's based on 750 students, 240,000 square feet. And then we have that cost of around $250 a square foot. It's about 60 million, so that's a good portion of the cost of the project. Then we broke out the sports facilities, so that's the stadium, the football stadium, practice fields, 2 softball, 2 baseball diamonds, tennis courts, all those sports facilities that go into here. So that's about 10.6 million for that. Then the site work cost, so that's all the grading, the site utilities, the asphalt, the curb and gutter, all that kind of stuff it makes up the $6.6 million cost. Then we have and that's kind of what we call like the hard cost of the project, but we also have soft cost. And soft cost is, we need engineering and architects to design it, so there's a fee that's associated with that. The cost of the land, if people choose to go with, the board chooses to go with the Donnie property, that's included in there. There's testing services that are needed, there's traffic studies that are needed, all these things are in that soft cost. And then we had the existing high school demolition, so that's about just under $2 million just to raise that entire site and then restore it to a grass, put topsoil and seed and have a kind of a park-looking space. The next one is Abraham Lincoln, so that's some of those capital improvements that would need to be done there. That's $3.4 million. And then the next 2 items there, as we've had this inflation over the last 6-7 months, and at the beginning, the first half of the year, it's been pretty significant since November until now. So we had to look for some ways to kind of get that, to get that cost down so we could do it for the money that was available, which is the referendum amount plus the interest that's going to be earned on the money. So
or on the bonds, or the revenue on the bonds, the revenue on interest, sorry. Not saying that clearly. So we looked at a couple different areas on where we could save some money on the project. And what we don't want to do is like the MEP systems, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, we didn't want to touch those. We want those to be, to leave those as is. The structure of the building, we want to make sure that structure is really sound. So we didn't look at that. The roof of the building, we want to make sure we have a solid roof on that, on the building. And those are kind of some of the things that over time are the most expensive things to repair and replace and maintain. So we didn't touch that. What we looked at is some areas like the sports facilities. Are there different type of lighting we could use on the facilities, or is lighting needed on the softball fields? We have artificial turf at the football stadium, but is that needed on the softball diamonds and other fields? Could that just be grass? We looked at the dugouts, different things like that. Just looked at some different things that we could do to get that cost a little bit lower. Then we looked at the finishes and the skin. So when I say the skin, the exterior of the building, there's a lot of different ways to approach that and still make it look really, really nice. One area is like a utility brick. It's a little bigger than your normal brick. It maintains, it'll hold up just as well, but there's an area we could save a little money. And it's kind of the makeup of the exterior. If there's maybe a little less brick, a little less glass, and maybe some alternate product everywhere else, some metal panels, whatever it is, there's ways to make the building look really nice. It'll last a long time, but we can get the cost down. Then when you go inside the building, we kind of look at the same approach. There's different ceiling systems. There's some really expensive ones and some that are like this, pretty basic. And that's what we kind of look for, is more of a basic, ceiling system like this. We looked at the flooring and tried to incorporate like some polished concrete into the flooring, still having carpet and LVT and VCT in areas, but just kind of doing a different mixture to help keep some of the costs down. So that's how we kind of came up with some of those savings there to get to the, the number we need to. So we're at about, just under 95 million for that. Like we talked about, there's about 6.8 million in inflation since the referendum passed and now, just kind of pausing on the project. Like Fig said, maybe 6.2, 6.3 million of interest. So it kind of offsets it. So it's a good and the bad news. Then what we did is at this chart at the bottom here, the new building cost analysis. This is from an RS Means book. What it does, it looks at 30 cities in our area and gets an average cost for a high school, a project similar to this one. And it kind of looks at good, better, best. And we looked at the cost, what we're projecting here, and it's between good and better. So it's still in a good place where we can get a really good, high quality building, but it's not quite at that, that best level. So that's we feel comfortable with where those numbers are at now. So any questions on this one?
Just give them a few minutes to think about it.
Okay.
Just for the rest of the board here, can you extrapolate a little bit? So you and I kind of talked the other day, but you updated this estimate for the current numbers for, to build it, basically breaking ground next year. And, RS Means data, I think it's important to recognize that that's, all the contractors use it. It's very reliable when you're talking in terms of estimating per square foot. So, historically, can you talk to the value of the RS Means data for you guys as general contractors, just so everyone here at the table understands the accuracy of the estimate?
Yep, and just to kind of even take a step back from there, what we do is probably about 40% of the revenue we do as a company is K-12 work. And we've been in business about 102 years, so we have a lot of historical data on these types of projects. So the first thing we do is look at our own historical data on what we could build the project for. And that's kind of our starting point. And we're estimating projects basically every week, every month. So we have current data coming in, and that's what we use on this. But then we also wanted to compare that to the RS Means, because it's a national database, and then they break it down by your region, in the Midwest, in this our Wisconsin area. And they look at those, it's about 30 cities that they look at, and they get an average of cost. What costs are coming in, and they do it, and we got a current book for 2023, so we have that current information. So it's a good check for us, just say, yeah, what we're seeing is also what RS Means is seeing, and they're fairly consistent. So it's just, it gives us reliability that our numbers are good. We can build it for that, and hopefully come in under that amount.
Quick question on that. So in this graph, it says Monroe on existing site, and it's above the Monroe on the DR site. strictly because of the cost, because you said good, better, best, yet building on the existing site is higher up there, closer to the better than the DR site. So why is that?
It's because of a couple reasons. It's a good question. One is we don't have the cost of the land, to purchase the land there. So that can go to other things. So we put, and then the other part of it is we don't have as many athletic fields at the existing site because there's not enough room. So two of the practice fields, we don't have one of the softball, at least a softball or baseball. We don't have another baseball, yeah.
So Dan, when you get to the next chart, you're gonna show us, you know, if we had to build on the existing site, you didn't quantify that athletic stuff differently though. It's the same price, even though there's less field.
Well, it's a little bit lower on the, here I got it in front of me, I should be wearing my, yeah, it's a little bit lower because of that, so it's 9.3 versus 10.6 million. And that's because we're one less baseball diamond and a couple practice fields, just because there's not room to build those on the existing site.
It's just confusing because you're using square foot numbers and you've still got that same gross square footage.
That's just the building too. And I should have clarified that in that RS means analysis where I have that good, better, best, that's just for the building. That doesn't include, that doesn't include the athletic fields. It's just the building cost.
Essentially, you're saying that the total cost, when you compare the two, you can keep slightly nicer things if we build on the existing site, but we're sacrificing a significant amount of acreage, and that's in the form of athletic facilities.
Yes, that's fair, yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, yes. And then for that future growth, if there is any, you just don't have room for that, and that's, yeah, where you would have on the new site. But we're also paying for additional land, so.
Thanks.
Would and maybe you'll talk to this about, when we move on to the next one, but the sports facilities reduction allowance and the skin and finishes reduction allowance, that should transfer over to the existing site as well, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we could apply that there too, and it would just be, yeah, it could be used however we want to do that. We could do that same analysis there.
Yeah, that's kind of project agnostic. That should transfer over to both.
Sure.
But we
Yeah.
have to spend that money somewhere, right? Like, we couldn't just not spend the 88 million, right? We couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, let's use the example. You can't take lights off of a second baseball field that doesn't exist. So it doesn't just transfer over because if there's not a second baseball field, then having savings from not putting lights on the second baseball field doesn't work. So I get where you're going, Mike, but it's not gonna quite equate that way, I'm guessing?
Right, not one-to-one, but there's no reduction shown on the
Correct. Yep, I get that.
site.
Yeah, and what we would do on this, just for whatever site, whatever project it is, you know, this is very conceptual, we haven't done any design yet, is we would look at all those options. I mean, there would be 9 months of design, of going through different meetings and looking at different products, different systems, and trying to pick what is the best one for this district, and what's the one that's gonna bring the most value. So we would do that analysis on both. Yeah.
Okay, other questions on this one before he goes to the current site option? We can come back once he's done with that too. So, go ahead. So Jen, you wanna look for, it's option 1 in there?
Okay, so this would be the new high school at the existing site, and that was per that, you know, that rendering that was shown earlier. Broke it down the same way, so we have that new building cost, that's 60 million. It's basically the same building, just on a different site. And then we looked at the sports facility. This is slightly less because, as I mentioned, there's just not enough room to get all the athletic fields on that. So that's 9.3 versus 10.6. Then we looked at the site work. And we kind of broke it into different areas of the site. We have kind of the main 35 acres, and then we have those additional 12 acres, which is that area south of Abe and west of Abe. And we broke those two costs out separate. What was interesting with this is the site work cost, it's a smaller site, but there's more cut and fill on the existing site than there would be on the new site. So those costs are almost the same. Then we looked at the building soft cost. That's a slightly less because you don't have the purchase of the land. But again, that's the engineering, the testing, the traffic studies, all the different things that are needed to go into the project. Then the demo is the same, 1.9 million, and then Abraham Lincoln, 3.4 million. And here, we're about that 1.5 lower, so we're at about 93.6 total for that. And then we kind of show that same, it's the exact same graph that we showed earlier, showing where that cost falls in between the good and the better. So questions on this one, or you guys need a few minutes to?
Any additional questions on this?
Maybe I have a question related to both. If we build on the same site, we have to take the entire existing high school down.
Correct. That's correct, yes.
Is that demo cost in the budget?
It is, I broke that out, it's the second from the bottom, existing high school demo, that's the 1,925,000. And then it also has, you know, raising the buildings and then kind of restoring them to a kind of grassy area. There really isn't, we don't have in there putting any parking lots or anything like that, it'd just be putting grass in there, making sure it drains off. The water would drain off.
So I know there's a question about this. But I guess I'd like to, this kind of goes way back, but I think it's kind of relevant to when you started, Rich. And I think maybe we need to, if we end up on the existing site, there'd be some follow-up questions I think that need to be asked to the bonding agency. Like, define what is the high school, because the PAC and the gyms, we've got the PAC actually separate on the referendum. Are those considered a high school, or could those three things be saved? And the reason I'm asking, because, you know, it would be a follow-up question to ask, are those the same thing? Are those synonymous with high school as a whole?
For the response we got from council.
I'd just like to ask some follow-up questions, because if we're stuck building on the same site, I think we should fight tooth and nail to try to save those, and then can we spend the interest earned on refurbishing some of those? Because can you give me, if you looked at, like, what's the cost of that precast and that steel structure? Like, if you've got it, everything interior, the footings, the foundation, the precast, the steel structure is a huge amount of money to buy right now.
I don't have that cost breakdown of what that, I can get that information for you fairly quickly, but I don't have that information right now.
I mean, I'm just
So as a follow-up,
saying, like, it's something that we as a district, if we're going to go on that site, we should do everything we can to try to push and say, can we save just those portions? The rest of the school, okay, whatever, that's the high school, but can we consider those separate and spend some of that money because of
think
the
you're also-
value in those?
Well, a couple of things. So one, we did pose that exact question to the council, to our bond council, or, to our bond council. And the answer the chief provided was with that consideration. That building and all of its attachments, the PAC, the M room, the gym, is that school. So anything that we built that attached to it would be a renovation or a remodel. So going back to ask again, we could ask again, but
I guess I would need to see
we
the
delineated that. Say again?
I guess I would need to see the question. What did we ask? Just, you know, for my personal knowledge, I'd really like to see the question, what we asked, and know if there's some follow-up questions we could ask.
And I would agree with that, because I think I saw what bond council said. But are we not a new board with the 3 new board members sitting on this board? What connotates a new school? We're a new board, and you still have some of the old boards sitting on this board. I think that's an opinion.
Well, so the opinion from bond council was, I mean, if you want to tie it to a period of time when new board members were seated, the opinion from bond council was provided last week. Now, if somehow you were privy to confidential bond council discussions prior to being seated on the board, I would not have any knowledge of that. So is that what you're inferring?
No,
You
no,
said
no. I'm
provided by
inferring
bond
that
council
the
prior
term-
to being seated, and this is a new board. So which Which communication are you talking about?
I'm inferring that when you talk about new, what does new mean? And I've brought that up several times, and I think that's what Mike is referring to, is that when you say new, if I buy a used car, it's new to me. That's what I'm saying. I agree with Mike in that I would like to see us investigate that further. That's all I'm saying.
So the question that was posed to bond counsel on behalf of the board was, could we reuse or update any of the existing structure? And the answer was what we got, and the answer was no. And we got that on Friday after they researched it for the better part of a week.
I guess I'd still like to see follow-on questions specifically to the pack and the gyms.
So the question that you'd like asked of bond counsel is,
I can-
can you tell us if the gym and the pack, the existing structures attached to the high school, are a part of the high school?
Yes. Would you consider that, could you consider that separate as far as the bond wording and stuff is concerned? And it's only relevant if we as a board decide that we're not gonna bring land forward to the electors and it doesn't get passed, right? But I think it's important because it's a huge chunk of money.
Mike, say your question again, I'm gonna write it down.
Why don't I follow up maybe and email it to you, because I need time to think about this and make sure, knowing the wording of the question that you asked and coming back, I don't know what the procedure is, but I don't want to have you ask something that isn't, very well thought out and worded to get the exact, follow-up response we're looking for. It's just, I think we as a board and a district need to do absolutely everything we can to save as much money as we can if we're forced to build on the existing sites. And the cost of those three portions alone, because they're some of the most recent. The precast I kind of looked at, it looks great. The steel structure, the footings and foundation, it all is great. And those cost items are a ton of money. I mean, you can gut everything.
So let's question your analysis there just for a minute. What would we do to verify? Is there,
That's what
to
they would
CG, would
have
there
to
be
do.
some type of analysis that you would do to vet what Mike said, which I think is an assumption at this point, that those facilities are in perfect condition, that there's no problem with the foundation underneath them, that the construction of those facilities is excellent
I didn't
and would
say
exceed,
perfect or
and would
excellent.
exceed,
I'd like
New
to just point out,
construction.
Rich, I did not say perfect or excellent.
we said it was great. I think you said
Okay,
the
They are,
steel
they're,
structure
for,
was,
for a 20-year-old building, they're great.
okay,
They
so
can be reused.
I
So-
think we just want to quantify that, right?
Yeah,
Instead of
and
assume it.
that's the
Yeah.
question I kind of asked C.G. Smith to start off this whole discussion,
Okay.
if they could put a value to that.
Yeah, and we started to look at that, and then once we got the information that we couldn't reuse it, we kind of stopped that analysis, but we can continue that. The one thing we did find is when the architect started looking at reusing portions of the building, they needed more square footage than the 240,000 square feet. I think it was more in the 280,000 square feet. Just because it's not as efficient. We have to build around the existing building. And then the project also is gonna take longer to construct, because we'll have to, do the additions first, probably get all the students moved in, and then go in and do the renovations, after that. But will it be less? Yeah, most likely it would be less cost, but it wasn't, our initial analysis, it wasn't as much savings as we thought it would be. By doing that, just because we're kind of landlocked on having to build around it. And because it's not brand new, it's not as efficient, we need more square footage. We still did a heavier renovation in those areas because there are the floor in the gym, there's other things that we're gonna need to do. We do need to do an analysis to really understand, are the foundations good in that area? Are there any issues with that? I agree the precast, that's, good shape. But we would need to do a little bit more analysis of that. But we did figure kind of looking at more of a heavy renovation in those spaces versus a lighter medium.
Yeah, I think, that's what the community is asking. That's what they want to see. And they want us to do our due diligence on that. So, I'm not trying to be confrontational here. I'm trying to do what's in the best interest of the community, the students, and make sure we get the most for our money. Anything we save on that, if we're stuck building on the existing site, is money we put back into the technology, the furnishings, the fixtures, the turf, stuff that would be taken out otherwise.
Then would you pull up the rendering on the current site, please? I'm just kind of curious. One of the things that you mentioned was that the possible placement of the pack in the gym could be problematic.
Well, there's another aspect of that too with, because right now, the kids that are involved in the arts would not necessarily be interfered with if we were building new. Whereas if we were reusing it, then they would also lose those performance and spaces for use.
So the pack and the gym, to save those elements, it's in the middle of the space that would be required for football field. I'm not sure where in this rendering those replacements would be, but they look pretty far from.
Dan, help me out here. This is a very preliminary rendering. Like, this could change 10 times in our design process. This is just slapping something on paper. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a different rendering if you were allowed to do that, to reuse those spaces. The football field would be in a different location. It'd be closer to where it probably is now. It would still have to shift. You wouldn't be able to keep it. But I think what we'd have to do is build additions off of that building, get those done, and then the area to the right, I guess, where that baseball diamond is in the background, then you demo all that, and then kind of build everything else that was, and then do all the renovation work after that. We can look at this, and we can do that analysis, and we can probably do it fairly quickly, just to have that information. I think we can absolutely do that. Like I said, we started to do that analysis, but then we kind of focused on these other two, just once we got the bond council gave their, I guess, ruling on it, so.
Just for clarity, help me out here. Understand for the board and the community, these renderings that we're showing are super, super preliminary. During a standard design process, they would change potentially significantly. They may end up very similar, but they may end up completely different depending on what they find on the sites when they do soil borings and topography. And so it's very fluid at this time. Is that accurate?
You're absolutely right, yeah. Yeah, but we needed something just to kind of put some cost to it and get an idea on what could fit on the site. So, but you're right, things will change, and if there's a better way to lay it out, we're gonna do that. We're gonna look for the most efficient, best way to do it that's gonna give the most value to the district and put the most money we can into these buildings in the field. So if there's a better way to lay it out, we absolutely will do that.
Maybe just to follow up real quick, because I think I agree with what you're saying, Mike, that if we end up in that situation, then it totally makes sense to go full court press and figure out whatever we can to save money and save things that folks want. What I don't hear you suggesting here is that you think, or you're trying to push in a direction of going toward that site as the thing that we choose, right? And so when I see the letter from Corals, I'm like, strategically as a board, if the possibility of maintaining those pieces if we build on the current site is at least I would say low, based on their expert opinion, then we should consider that in the path that we go. And I would even say one other thing, like, that actually makes me more compelled to go to a new site, because if we could save those things and they could be of value to the community while also having a totally new school building with more acreage, that seems like a double win in some ways. So I just wanted to name, I think I agree with what you're saying, that yes, if we end up in a place where we have to go current site, let's press it, let's figure out if we can keep it. But what I don't hear you trying to suggest is that we should do that. You're just saying if we end up in that space, then we should, yeah.
Absolutely correct.
It seemed to me that all of the board needs to have full confidence that, the referendum or the opinion from Quarles and Brady, that we're all confident that that is correct. Because we need to get past that, I think, or this is a new discussion about, utilizing it in the existing high school. Would you agree?
As an example, what, Phil, would you envision being the process to get to a high level of confidence?
Well, I don't know. I mean, perhaps a further discussion with Quarles and Brady. I think we probably have 2 or 3 board members, and rightly so, need to be fully confident that that is the final decision and opinion from Quarles and Brady. I would put that question, I suppose, to Mike and perhaps you, Terry, where, I'm with you. as far as, wanting to be confident that, that there's no way we can use any of that existing high school because of the referendum language, but what do you need to be fully confident that this is what it is? Because if that's where we're at, it's kind of a moot discussion that we've been having as to, a good discussion, but it's kind of a moot point. So I put the question, I guess, to Mike and Terry, what do you need?
Lisa, have you experienced, it's Lisa, right? I'm sorry. Have you experienced any of this before? I've seen you
This
kind
is
of
the
nodding your
first
head a
time.
little bit, but I'm curious if you have any insight here.
No, I'm just, I trust with Quarles and Brady, they've been doing it for longer than I've been in the business, and I've been in for 35 years. I trust what they say, and I can see it's attached, so it's one building. If it was two buildings, I mean, is that what she said? I wasn't on the call, but that's what I would assume, so I really, I don't think you're gonna be able to save it. I mean, get it in writing if you don't already have it in writing.
She did send us a written opinion.
Yeah, or, get her on and have her come to the next board, or be at Zoom the next board meeting or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that's one school building, so the whole building would have to be raised. That's,
I think that I think that's a great idea. Maybe if we could get her or is it her?
she would do it, she'd zoom
At
in.
a board meeting to zoom
Yeah.
in so that not only we could hear it, but the community could hear it, because, that it's a big point of contention in this community right now, so I want to make sure.
There's a big difference between addition and remodeling and building new. I mean, there's a line right between, and that would be addition and remodeling if you kept that piece and put something else around it. And you don't have addition and remodeling written in the question. And I think that's what she would say in more legal terms, but layman's terms, that's what I see.
All right, so we'll work to
Would
try
that
to
help?
get,
I mean, would that,
Would
do you
that
feel
help?
that one, would that help? What do you feel?
I understand what you're saying about the remodeling thing, but it just, the language to me in the question is just not as clear cut to me.
So having her here would help?
That would be helpful.
I think that's a good idea.
For us to be able to ask her, is that not new? When you're adding on, you have a new building after the fact. So I guess, yes. Because we don't know how the question was posed.
so we'll work to,
We'll need to schedule a new meeting, another meeting.
yep, we'll see if we can schedule that with Allison. I don't know, well, we'll see how the rest of the conversation goes tonight, if it needs to be a special board meeting between now and the next regular, or if it can wait for the next regular board meeting. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
Terry?
Yes.
Sound fair? All right. Okay, so we were talking about the estimates. Any other questions about the estimates? Okay. All right,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Maybe Dan, you can help. Those estimates, how confident are you that that's what it's going to be? I look at this too, and I look if we do it on a new site, it's an additional year to do it on the current site. So what does that have, do you see that have any impact on your estimates, or did you already take that into account?
Yeah, we took that into account. I am
Okay.
very confident in the numbers that we can
Okay.
do it for this. I wouldn't give you guys, you can tell we didn't back into numbers to get to this. We did what we thought it would cost today and shared those numbers. And like I said, we had, I think we had shared with this group just kind of a history of different referendum projects that we did and kind of showed that we hit that budget or came in a little bit under at the end. And that would be the intent on this. So that's not the way we do things. We don't give you a number just to, get things to go a certain way. We give the real number and then, really work hard during the design phase and construction, always looking for ways to, look for cost reduction, look for value-added ideas, and continue to do that throughout the project. So.
There's no questions on the estimates provided by CG. Okay, all right. So I think we can talk a little bit now about community engagement. Ready for that? Community engagement and a timing for meeting of the electors and how those two timelines can possibly overlap. would be something that I think we should discuss tonight. As requested from administration, you have a sample survey in your board packets this evening. Content of that survey, and if that is the direction we choose, is open for us to discuss tonight. I'd ask Fig to kind of walk us through that survey. Any recommendations from administration to conduct it, or other methods of community engagement?
So we looked at this prior to knowing what the total inflationary costs were on the project. And we looked at the timeline to do another survey and the information that it was gonna get for the board, which the board would follow, of course. And the information that's contained on the survey is information that could also be shared in a newsletter and information sessions. It wouldn't necessarily, I think the time it would take to complete a survey and go through the results, it's gonna push us back minimally about a month. So that could add significantly, could add $1 million to the cost. The information that's in here, it's comparing the DR property, talks about the DR property, and it talks about the current site, which are the ones that we had discussed. And it says it has a few things on there. And again, this is just a draft. This is just something to get the board to think about what a survey might look like. If the board decided they wanted to do a survey, we can certainly do something differently.
And then in terms of community engagement, concurrent to the survey, if we perform it after, or standing on its own if we choose not to do the survey, what could community engagement look like?
Yeah, so I'd recommend that the board would we'll set up some information sessions over the next 2 to 3 weeks, so the public can learn what's gone into the decision-making to give many generations of our kids and the families and community the best opportunity to benefit from this project. So time is a factor, like we've talked about. And when I talked to CG earlier today, because we wanted to work on what's the latest date we could have to do something, whether it's gonna be a new site, approval of a new site or current site, and still be able to get a shovel in the ground this spring of '24, and that date's right around June 23rd, because of the planning and everything else that has to go into the project to get it started in the spring. So it's a short window, it's about a month.
And that proposed timeline is in our packets, correct?
I don't believe I got that in because I didn't finish that up
I think
until,
it's high school timeline attached to that.
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, so Jen, it's this one. So not easy to read.
Want me to walk through quickly, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
I can, it's kind of hard to see. So we looked at option 1, option 2. The option 1 is the new high school at the existing site. We kind of showed starting on the left-hand side at the top, that kind of pause in the project for the last 7 months or so. That's what that's showing there. Then we have about 9 months to design, and then we'd have 3 different bid packages that we would issue before the final design is done. So the first one would be those long lead time items like generator, switchgear, HVAC equipment. We get that ordered so it could be here in time for the project. And then the next one we looked at would be like an early footing and foundation package. So we could get started as soon as the weather broke, we can get started on that. And then the last one would be when the design is finished, that's bid package 3, that would be the rest of the project. And then construction, for the new high school would be 20 months. So that started around April of '24, and then that would finish, around the end of the year on 2025. Then after that, we would then demo we'd move students in to the new building, then demo the existing building, and then that spring of 2026, we would start the athletic fields. And then that would take us, I got about 9 months there. We tried to do that a little bit quicker, but it's about 9 months to get all those fields done. And that takes us out to, November of 2026. The option 2, I don't know if I want to pause a minute just to see if that makes sense. Okay.
So the design phase, and just want to be absolutely clear here, that's just a linear design process. There's a significant sense of urgency being placed on needing to get this done like right now, or I've heard $1 million a month multiple times. How much fluff is built into that? Could that be crashed? I mean, you can crash the schedules of design a little bit for far less than $1 million a month if we delay, correct?
Yeah, we would want to make sure that that's the maximum design, and we'd hopefully do a little better than that. And yeah, we can get with, PRA, the architect, and kind of strategize on how we do that. They would lay out all the different milestones that we need to hit, all the different meetings that we would need to attend, the different levels of drawings that we would have. There would be a program level drawing and SDs, DD, and then construction documents. So that would all get laid out, and we'd absolutely try to accelerate that if we can. The one thing that we're kind of stuck with is, March, April is probably the earliest we can start in 2024 just because of the weather. I mean, there's some things we can do, but at some point, we're not gonna wanna, put footings on frozen ground, right? And we wanna be careful for that because we want a really good foundation on this building and no issues. But yes, there'd be different strategies, Mike, that we would use to make sure that we hit that, if not accelerate on that. Same thing with the construction schedule and everything else. We're gonna try and beat all those dates that are on there.
Yeah, and I guess my point to the board is, while there is a sense of urgency and a significant one, the true cost right now isn't, 1 month isn't gonna cost an extra $1 million. We'd be able.
Design, you're talking?
No, for like inflationary costs, because an extra month delay is not gonna actually push back the start date. We could fix that in that design phase.
It doesn't actually push the bid package, right? Like,
By shortening the design period.
well, I just, and maybe to add to Mike's question, how do you map the June 22nd date that you just named, Fig, to this? I'm not seeing how those two things are connected.
So we can look at the next one next. So Mike, I wasn't quite following what you're saying, but when I got.
Start design till July 1st, we could still break ground in March if the frost is out of the ground. We can cut the design time to 8 months instead of it being 9, and we're still gonna get it done by crashing things.
Well, I would like to check with PRA because they told me they need 9 months.
Because that's maybe something to ask, so we better understand the sense of urgency.
Yeah, but there are some early bid packages too. So, and they're gonna need a certain amount of time to get those bid packages ready so we can order that. I mean, if it's, a year and a half to get a generator, we're gonna have to order that pretty quickly.
I mean, it is a year and a half to get a generator.
So I don't know if that's true that we could wait a month on design.
Why is the delay start time longer for the new construction on new land versus building on the existing site? Why is that?
Because we would have to, the district would have to do some communication with the community about the property being purchased, and then I think there's a 2-week notice that's needed to notify the electors that there's gonna be a vote on that land. So I figured about 2 weeks to communicate what's happening, 2 weeks to give them notice, and that's about that. So that's another month. Pause. And you guys can probably explain that better than I can on what that.
Yeah, so
process is, but-
it's approximately a 2-week notice for a class 2. So that's where we get out a month. So that gives us that time to do that communication.
To vote on the new land with the electors?
Correct.
Okay.
And then I added another 2 weeks just because I thought, like Fig said and others said, it would be good to communicate to the community what's happening and give that 2 weeks, then give the 2-week notice. And that's why I added that extra month on that.
In the design process it has reliances on third parties, so stakeholders that are in the district and in the community. So just to point out that it's not just PRA that we could come and say, you have 1 month less. That entire time frame has to compress, and then all those third parties and external stakeholders, all of those things have to align. And so I guess to Mike's point, confirmation that 9-month window, what does it include so that the board understands whether or not that can be compressed and why it possibly couldn't?
Yeah, I mean, we can check on all that. Right now, I'm being told 9 months is what they need. And you're right, there are other consultants. There's civil engineers, structural engineers, mechanical, electrical, plumbing consultants that need to be involved. Part of it is, I've been kind of keeping the architect up to date on potential timelines, but they haven't been given, notice proceed. So they're working on other things right now. So we need to re-engage them and get them on this, as quickly as we can. So, but yes, that's correct. And just kind of real quick on the second option there, this is a new high school at a new site. That pause period is a month longer because of what we talked about, because the voting with electors of the new property. Same design period, 3 bid packages, get started in April, 20-month duration. That does include, and during that time, we can do all the athletic fields during that 20 months. So that's where we pick up that time on the new site. And then after that, it's, demoing the building, and then we wait till spring to restore it. And that's the timeline there. And I do show in there too, I kind of overlooked it, but Abraham Lincoln, we were thinking that could be done this summer of '24, and then if there's any extra work, we have the summer of '25 to finish up, but I feel like we could get that done in the summer of '24.
There's no possibility of moving that up to this summer?
No, there's not, because a big part of it is replacing the HVAC system, and there's just no way we can design it and get that equipment in time. We looked at that, we consulted with a couple mechanical contractors, and they said there's no way. There's 24 is the earliest that you'll be able to do that. Because we've kind of, also paused and, during this time as well. So we did get, and just so everyone's aware, we did get bids, competitive bids for civil engineering services. Nothing's been awarded, but we have that ready to go. So whenever we get that direction, we can just get them on board right away.
That's on which site? One or either?
Either one. Either one. The price was based on the DRs, a new high school at a new site. But I don't know that it was a percentage based on the cost of the work, of the cost of the site work. So I think that could apply to either one based on that percentage.
I just clarify, because I honestly don't remember. When we originally passed this in November, was the plan to do it this summer, or was it always to do it next year? Was our original plan to start this summer?
Yeah, I think originally we were gonna try and start this summer, but yeah, we kind of missed that window at this point. But yeah, that was the thought.
Okay.
I think the hopes was to get potentially the bathrooms done, and then during the course of the lawsuit, we actually had to pause and not move forward with any of it. So kind of put that to bed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. That is correct.
Right. So sort of just a verification from board members at a high level, we've talked a whole lot about new site or current site. With that understanding, does anybody have concern with using one of those two approaches? Is there an alternate that you would want investigated, knowing that it could take months, at least likely 6 to 8 weeks, to identify a property, engage in negotiations, bring that forward, and that all could not be done publicly. It would have to be done as a part of the work of the board in closed session. So I just want to level set real quick that current site or proposed site on DR, those are the options that folks are comfortable with moving forward with one of those two possibilities.
Can I ask, the first site that was brought to the electors, is that, that's not under contract at all anymore? But the DR site still is under contract, the terms wouldn't change on the DR. So you'd have to go back to negotiate on the BNS property?
Correct. Yep, so after the BNS property was declined by the electors, when we negotiated terms on the next property for DR, we were careful to make sure that that we could bring it back at least 2 times. So the terms do allow us to continue to have it under contract, and we can bring it before the electors again.
So of the properties that we looked at, BNS, because we already have a lot of the foundational work done, that one probably wouldn't take 6 to 8 weeks to get negotiated.
How long do you expect if we if we surveyed and added the BNS property back in there, because I'm just concerned about the DR property because it was such a huge, and I don't know, some people say that the vote was a result of, just the no to the referendum, but I don't know that, right? None of us really know that. I'm wondering, because some of the work's been done with the BNS property too, would it make sense for us to question the community on the 3 options that have already been brought to them rather than just the 2? Just in case that, if we're looking at new site versus existing site, what if it just is that people absolutely dislike that property because it's on the other side of 69? That's my concern.
Can we survey a property that isn't under contract? And are we putting ourselves in jeopardy of surveying that the cost could go up? I'm asking, I don't know. I would think if I see my property on a survey and everybody wants it, I might not negotiate for the same rate, but I don't know.
So probably the best thing would be, the board would direct me to contact that real estate agent again and just see what terms they would be looking at.
I mean, I do recall, it's a good question, Mike, and it never went to a meeting of the electors, but there was quite a bit of negative feedback and public comment throughout our meetings on the BNS property. I think traffic congestion with Northside right there was a big issue. I think there were some adjacent landowners that were very much not in favor of it, and so to be aware of that.
Yeah, and I
There was
watched
quite
that and I heard those, but I also heard similar with the DR property, crossing the highway, and, the farmer next door didn't like the idea, so that's why I bring it up, I guess.
Sure, I understand.
And there's so the conversations that we had with land council, with Bill, if we take a question to the electors, his recommendation is to bring forward 1 property, not 2. We did ask, we did consult with him, and we asked, can this be done through a general or special election to provide an opportunity for everybody to vote? And if they wanted to vote absentee, then they could vote absentee. Per Wisconsin statute, this must be accomplished through a meeting of the electors. Follow-up question that we asked him was, okay, if we wanted to bring multiple properties so that, we don't have to keep coming back over and over again, could we do ranked choice voting? So that if folks had decided that, maybe BNS is their number 1 and the DR property is their number 2, then we could arrive at one or the other being passed. What he cautioned was if you bring 2 pieces of land before the electors is you may have one group of folks that would say yes to that one parcel, one group of folks that would say yes to the other parcel. They'll say no to each other, and then the underlying group that will say no always will result in both pieces failing.
Yeah, that makes sense, you dilute the vote.
But could you survey them and then only bring 1? Could we ask FIG to negotiate and then have 2 properties under contract, then in survey, so that we know which property to bring forward, so we don't have to worry about that?
And
I don't know. Is that
it would be possible, but the amount of time to
do all that?
do the survey and get it back under contract and then bring it back before the electors is, if we feel as a board strongly that we need to provide or identify if that is an option that we want to go back to, there's a cost associated with that. I hear what you're saying, Mike, but again, I think in my in my initial comments, it's not perfect because forward-looking costs are unknown, but I think we should use that as guidance. It's not assured that we can compress timeframes down to the point to avoid all of those inflationary pressures, so.
My question to the board is just to think about, how confident, if we as a board decide to bring another property forward, how confident are we that the property on County DR is going to be accepted by the community versus if we looked at that initial property?
No, so I had a similar question, and well, let me ask one question, and I have a suggestion associated with what you just said, Mike. So if I'm looking at the cost on the BNS property, so we're looking at $1.2 million more for the BNS, and we're already talking about making concessions for the DR, the Donnie property. And that's at a land price that was initially 17.5 that we don't have under contract. And so the odds that, I mean, I'm not a savvy land negotiator by any means, but if we go back to them and say, hey, we'd like to talk again, the odds of that going down are pretty small. And I would say the odds of that going up are pretty decent, right?
So I did have a contact with somebody through the owner, and he expressed interest in honoring a similar deal to what we previously had. Just so
Okay.
that's out there, you know that.
Thank you. So the first part of the question, that would require additional concessions, right? We'd be talking about reducing the cost even more?
Well, I think you have, look at the overall cost with the land, because that cost per acre of land is less than the Donnie, so it is more expensive, but 100,
Okay.
well, less than 100,000, right?
If there's also a road, right, that you talked, that's not included on there?
There's about a
Oh, the
4,
road, and it's 300,000, so, 400,000.
I was looking at throwing numbers. I'm sorry.
$400,000 premium for that.
So maybe could somebody, I think what I would ideally like, if we were in a world where we could even have, if we were comfortable with a July target date, which I understand the pressures, so I'm throwing this out there. What I would suggest is that we adapt the survey and not have it be a comparison, which one do you want more, but go property by property, DR, would you vote yes on this? If not, why not? And you could have, they could choose options, or they could have an open response so that we could understand what are the actual barriers that we could potentially address through community engagement. And do the same thing with the BNS. Would you vote yes on this? Yes or no? If not, why not? So that, if we're gonna do a survey and we could actually get a survey done in 2 or 3 weeks and feel like we get a representative sample that would give us both a prediction on if the election were held, or the elector meeting were held today, could we get a yes vote? And then we as a board could come back to that and say, okay, 40% of people said that they would vote yes on the DR property. We think we can win another, 11% via community engagement. That's the path I would suggest, because to me, it doesn't make sense to just say, let's go with the existing site at all, based on the information I'm seeing. And I'm not confident that in a month, we'll be able to get a yes without some greater analysis of why we got a no previously. So that would be my suggestion, to adapt the survey, run it for 2 weeks, get as many as we can, do community engagement for 3 or 4 weeks after that, and try to get a yes vote by the end of July. And I realize that's not on the timeline you guys are suggesting, but that would be my suggestion.
If we went that path, Jim, I would strongly suggest that we take time to get that land under contract before we engage or send out any kind of survey. Even kind of talking about it like this is going to create
Sure.
a competitive disadvantage.
That makes sense. I agree with that.
I also just want to state, as we are pondering all of this, we all sit here and volunteer all these hours for the betterment of our kids. And we are looking at 2 years of kids who are not going to play a single home game. And that breaks my heart. These are kids that have lost 2 years to COVID. And I know we're talking dollars and they matter, but our kids matter. And I don't want us to lose sight of that.
I also think we need to have some sort of community engagement. And so I don't know exactly what that looks like. I'm not fully confident that a survey is gonna get us the information that we need, but to your point, I think we need to understand the why, right? And I think we need other people to understand, right? If we're gonna build on the current site, here's the true cost, here's what it's actually going to cost, and in dollars and in human kid capacity, right? Like, here's what it's going to cost to our kids. Here's what and conversely, here's what's going to happen if we build on a new site. Here's the impact it will have on kids, here's the dollars, here's all of that, for people to truly understand that. think we need that before, if they're filling out a survey absent that information, I'm not sure we're gonna get great results.
I would agree with both of you. I really like Jim's idea of how to survey it. And I like your thought of putting in there the cost benefit analysis. And I wonder, and I don't know this, I'm just wondering, talking about this and adding that second site, does that maybe give us a competitive advantage? Because now they know we're considering maybe more than one, which there might be incentive to lower that price.
Lower which price?
I don't know, either one of them. So I'm suggesting that he goes and starts to negotiate with, and like you said, work on multiple properties and do a survey. Take the time so that we're set and ready to go no matter which way the survey results come back. And we have a very thorough, as long as we get at least a statistically valid response rate on the survey, which is, I don't know, typically extremely low. So it gives us some feedback before we just take it to the community and then just get stomped on if we take the wrong thing, not understanding why.
So if we're going to direct administration to reengage on a property, then it doesn't make sense to do that unless there's going to be support to put that second property in front of the electors. So sort of straw poll. How are folks feeling about bringing a second property back for survey with the intention of identifying which of the two properties we would bring to the electors? I'm not suggesting that we would bring two properties to the electors. That is not what our council recommends. I don't think it would make sense, but.
Surveying.
So, for clarity, we're also asking if they prefer existing school, existing sites, knowing the pitfalls, right? So it could be the results of the survey end up with us bringing nothing to the electors. I mean, if that's what the majority of the survey results come back, we have to consider that, right?
We would have to consider it, I would agree. I don't know that we could consider the community engagement to be complete and full through the course of the survey. So the question essentially is, and in order to satisfy the referendum language, which says we will build on a new site or acquisition of land, I think it behooves us to bring a site 3 times, to ask the electors on 3 occasions for a site.
I didn't think we could. It was 2 per.
It's 2.
It's 2 per. It's 2 per, but this would be the second round, either of these 2 sites that we're talking about.
We're going to our third meeting of electors.
Going to a third
Got it.
meeting of the electors. If a third time we're declined by the electors, I believe that satisfies some of the guidance from council on constructing on the same site. So I want to make sure that we've gone 3 times to ask. And I hear what you're saying, why would we ask if we get survey results that say it's going to be a no? But
I'm sorry, my intention is not to extend this meeting unnecessarily, but just, I'm not fully understanding because I thought at the very beginning, we said that, like, bond council has told us that we could build on the existing site with the new school.
Right, but the referendum specifically said new school, new site. I think that's what Rich is talking about. That 6,000 plus people voted in that should we honor that vote by going for a third time at land?
Should we, or do we have to?
Well, we don't
we
have
should.
to.
Do we have to? No. So
Okay.
there, with
Okay,
with
that's
building
fair.
on the same
Yep.
site comes some pitfalls, right?
Yes.
Because the referendum was passed, new building, new site. The referendum language says acquisition of land. There is some flexibility in there that we are trying to take advantage of. But to be assured
Okay.
that we have asked and been declined, I think 3 times is
Okay,
What we
that,
need
I
to
was
do.
just misunderstanding. You're saying we should,
Bring
not that
something
we
to
have to. So
Right.
that's what was confusing me, is like, we said we don't have to, but then we just said we did have to. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
All right, so is there, do folks on the board want us to investigate a second site and have Fig re-engage with BNS as the property would be the second site?
Is this like a motion?
No, it's not,
It's a
it's not a
thumbs
motion,
up,
it's just a
thumbs up.
structural thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing.
Yeah, yes, I think so.
Sure. Dylan?
Yeah.
Nikki?
Yes.
Teresa? Phil?
What was the question again?
Do we want to direct administration to re-engage with BNS and see if they will honor the verbal agreement that they gave to him to re-engage at the same terms?
No.
No? Okay. Terry?
Yes.
Jim?
Can we concurrently set some informational sessions? Can we concurrently do that to try to glean some of this information?
Yeah, so we're not quite done with the discussion, so, yep. Yeah, so we're gonna continue to kind of work through some of this. Right now, we've got 2 follow-ups. We're going to re-engage and see if BNS would honor the previous terms, right? We're going to arrange for a conversation with Allison from Quarles and Brady to discuss definition of, you know, what is the school? How do you define what the existing footprint is in case we have to build on the current site? So we're taking steps to possibly offer the DR site or the BNS site. And we're also taking steps to make sure we know what is possible if we have to build on the current site, which does not require elector approval. Does that make sense to everybody? So those are the options. Additional discussion tonight would be for a time frame for community engagement and a possible meeting of the electors. Now, Fig, I'd be interested in your recommendation if you have to go and re-engage and negotiate on property, even though you have a verbal agreement that we could reinstate the previous contract. How much time do you think you need to complete that?
Based on our conversation, it's possible we could maybe get it done this week.
Okay,
Now, that's also gonna require us to drop more earnest money, which is not gonna be refundable at this time.
what is the cost of the earnest money?
It's gonna be $10,000 to $15,000.
Okay. Anybody on the board want to change their mind based on the earnest money?
Whatever site we don't choose, we don't get that earnest money back, just so everybody's aware.
So we lost the earnest money on the BNS property last time then?
Nope,
No.
because we had it written in, if it didn't pass the meeting of electors, then it didn't pass, and then we got it back.
We wouldn't take 2 properties to the electors though, so we wouldn't have that as a
I see.
failure to.
Thank you.
So I would not consider it if they wouldn't be able to negotiate a refundable earnest money. I mean, that's just something that,
Well, so,
but that's, I guess, for a closed session with negotiations, I
yeah,
don't want us
so I
to
don't want
just
to,
automatically put earnest money down if you're going to talk to them, right?
No,
the earnest money would be for a signed contract. So if we enter
Right.
into a contract,
Okay.
that's when the earnest money comes in.
Yes.
If it gets to that point, we'll kind of reserve those discussions for a closed session.
Okay, thank you.
we do have a real estate attorney that does all of this, and this is his job. That's what he does professionally. It's real estate
Just by
purchases
talking
for
to him.
schools.
Just by talking to them this week, we're not like automatically out 15 grand? No. Okay,
Unless we agree on a contract.
okay, I guess that was what I heard, like, holy crap, if you talk to them this week, we're out 15,000.
Well, we do have to,
You have to be under contract in order to survey it, though, I would think, right?
And we have to,
So we're gonna lose with one of them, if
so,
we're surveying both.
yep, and but we're directing Fig right now to engage in those contract negotiations. He's going to complete the contract negotiations, and then the contract, he'll sign the contract. And then there will be a contingency in there on full board approval. So then the contract comes back to the full board and we vote on it.
So am I interpreting correctly that if the terms are higher, we're not interested in engaging in another contract? Is that accurate? Since we're kind of negotiating in public right now.
So,
Closed session?
hang on, yep, so we're gonna stop. All we've asked for this point in time is for you to reengage and see if there's interest in honoring the terms that we had before. Any additional discussion will be enclosed. And we'll do it under a special meeting if we need to. Okay.
Just a comment, like, I know this is frustrating for everybody, right? But it's super important that everyone understands and that the community understands. So I think it's worth the frustrating conversation and the difficult conversation and some of the, the talk back and forth. So I can see people getting frustrated, so I just want to kind of set that baseline that it's really important.
I think that is an absolute accurate point. However, some of what we are talking about can be putting us in jeopardy for negotiations. I think we have to be very careful with that.
Okay.
And that's where if you're seeing frustration, that's why. I don't want to spending unnecessary dollars because people are watching.
Okay. So, let's talk a little bit about the survey. It sounds like there is interest from the board to conduct the survey. We're gonna ask a couple of questions, hopefully, regarding 2 properties. I heard the content of the survey should not just be, would you say yes or no, but it's more, why would you say no? Is that correct, Jim?
The survey draft that we saw was, which one would you prefer? And that, at this point, I don't think that's what we need. We need, would you vote yes on this? Distinctly, would you vote yes on this? And then, to your point, Rich, we need some kind of analysis to better understand, if no, why no? That's what I would suggest.
Okay.
And maybe to what you were saying, Mike, I guess we could put the existing site on there, but that's the default, right? So that's like, I don't have a strong opinion on that, but that if we don't get a yes on one of the pieces of land, then we're gonna go on the existing site. So I don't have a strong opinion on whether or not we include that. That's maybe my point.
I think to Jim's point, it's implicit. If we survey and neither of those 2 pieces come back with an overwhelming amount of support, implicitly, we would end up building on the current site. So do we ask the question explicitly, or do we just ask about the 2 sites?
In the full discussion about informing voters what it means, I think it would be important to a lot of people, like myself, I have kids in high school, to know that they won't be playing football there for years. Won't be playing soccer there for years, no track meets. If we're able to save the pack in the gym, no basketball, no wrestling, no plays, right? No tennis. I'm trying to think what we would have. So I think people would want to know that in a survey. Granted, the default would be new building at the old site, but what the costs of that would be, not necessarily monetarily, but
Right.
And we talk about disruptions, but I don't think like me personally, it's traffic, not necessarily like high school will not look like high school for years.
Good point. It gives us another chance to communicate some of the analysis.
So on the survey, then, we would have a site 1, yes or no, if no, why? Site 2, yes or no, if no, why? Do we have a question that says either site? Put that as one of the options, and then just a plain no site?
Yes. I believe that would provide feedback for folks if they were going to support either site. The expectation would be that they would.
I don't think if we're doing individual yes and no's, we should do an either or. That seems confusing. You're saying yes to this one, and then there's another page of another site, say I would vote for this one. If people just vote yes both times,
It's
it
implied
satisfies the yes to either.
that they would be fine with either, maybe.
I think so it would be 2 pages of information and then it'd be one question. Yes to site 1, yes to site 2, yes to either site, no to either site, I think is what Fix is saying.
I think you're kind of saying the same thing, Dylan.
Yeah, I think you're saying the same thing. Okay.
I don't think that's what Jim was suggesting, though.
I think, is that what you said, except in addition, if no, then why? If no to both, then why?
We would wanna know no's to each one though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we would do is, right, if it's no, then why?
I didn't understand what you were suggesting though.
So we'd have site 1.
Yep.
Yes or no, if no, why? Site 2, yes or no, if no, then why?
Yep.
And then a question of, you'd support either site, or then a response of either site or no site.
I realize planning a survey by committee is not the most, but I don't understand why the last piece would be necessary, because we would get that information if they clicked yes for either of the previous two.
Right.
Or if they said no to both, then we would get that answer. I think the bigger question to what Eric was saying is like, including the existing site, here's the cost benefit analysis of that like we would for the first two. Is this your preference, or, you know, something like that?
So using the survey to inform about what the actual costs are in the lost time for the students.
And that's in the draft, right? It has some, like a 1 page on the DR property, 1 page on the BNS property, 1 page on that gives a cost and a benefit. And then,
But then we're not necessarily gonna ask about the current site, because if neither of the sites is supported, the current site's gonna be the site.
Right, but I think what Jim is saying, there needs to be awareness if we use the existing site, and that would be in the draft
Okay.
page.
yeah.
That's right. That communication is critically important, because I think I've heard a lot of people, the perception is that if we do it on the current site, it's gonna be significantly less, and doesn't seem to be accurate at all. And so I think for people to understand that and to have all that information, I don't know how to, and maybe it's me, I don't know how to do that.
Does
through
it
a
need to
survey
be part
first.
of the survey though, or can it be, because I understand when you start doing surveys and you get more than the 2 questions, that's why we, all the surveys. I mean, because we're talking about doing informational sessions and having information on the website, I would assume, if we're putting it, that we could have just the 2 sites and give the information about what it would cost the students if it was on the existing site.
I think that information is gonna be available, just like it was in the 4 or 5 years leading up to the referendum too. And I don't think our website gets as much people don't visit as much. Social media has a pretty good following right now, because this is a very interested topic.
Sure.
So, yeah, so we're gonna continue to use our communication methods to get that stuff out, just like we have.
Should we have it in the survey though, where it says if you've chosen no to both above, this is the default option and here are the pros and cons to that, or the costs involved with that, and just have it on this? So people can't say they
We can
didn't
design
get
our
it?
survey any way we want.
I mean, I just, it doesn't have to be a yes or no, it's just if you choose
Just have
no to
that
be above,
information.
this is what it
If you choose
is.
no to both of these, then the
Yes.
option is building on the existing high school. And
Which
here are
involves
some of the
this.
things that
Here's-
would
Here's the
impact our
cost, and here's
students
the-
and
yeah,
the
right.
cost, blah, blah,
Right.
blah.
I
And
think-
not
yeah.
have it as part of the question, but have that information on there. If you choose no to both of these,
Right.
this is the default option and these are the costs associated with it. I like that idea.
What I don't want is for someone to get a survey and have 2 sites and then have to go find it somewhere else to get, well, what if I don't like either of these? I don't want them to have to go to Facebook or go to a website, I'd rather it be all on here.
Okay. So
That's my preference, but I don't know.
I'm gonna make a suggestion that FIG takes some of the feedback they heard tonight, back to school perceptions. They write these surveys all the time. We
Good.
have an idea of what we want to ask the public. We know that there's going to be possible sites depending on what negotiations with BNS create, right? So I'd say let's table the sort of specifics of the survey for now, and then let's get some feedback from school perceptions.
Yeah, so just so the board is aware, the survey process itself it'll take a month to 6 weeks on the survey process. And that definitely is gonna push that spring date. So
If we take a property right now, it's gonna probably be a no, no matter what we do, if we don't do one of these options anyway. So I feel like it's time that we're gonna have to spend.
You don't think we can engage, have with listening sessions get there? You think we have to do a survey?
I think we're gonna get feedback that I didn't get an invite, or I didn't, it would happen during this time when I was working. I think, I don't know.
No, fair.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, my idea was listening sessions before we were bringing a third property or another property back too. I don't know. I think we have to do all the above, Teresa, honestly.
Part of listening sessions, how do you quantify though? I mean, how do you quantify where people are at? Some people will sit and listen and they
Sure.
won't say anything.
Sure.
I mean,
That's true.
How do
Sure.
you quantify the?
Sure.
For a survey, you're getting definitive answers that it's a yes or a no, but if you're doing listening sessions, you're informing them, but you're not getting any feedback.
True.
The downside with the survey is, you know, you hope that, you know, a high percentage of the district population responds.
Right.
Rich, as a reminder, I think it's important that the board, so the complete board is confident in what Quarles and Brady. This is just a reminder, because I think, you know, if you can't use any of the existing high school, that's an important part of the thought process, I would think. The people, we ought to be there and concluded on that, I think, prior to the survey hitting the street.
Okay. That's fair.
And just so I'm clear, when we go back to these forums or listening sessions or however we want to frame them, I still think those are a fantastic idea, because I think we need to bring all of this and be able to have people ask questions. And we may not solve anything, but at least they can go, and when they know that a survey's coming, and if they get the survey, then at least they've had, if they were able to attend, I think it may help them feel more informed.
Yep,
I think-
and I think,
Sure.
to your
I think
point, we
it's
need to
both
do
and.
that. Yeah, we gotta do that while we're
Yeah.
getting ready for the survey.
I really think so.
Yeah, I think that if we were as a board prepared to move forward with either current site or DR, I don't know that we would spend the time on the survey.
100% agree.
We would, instead of a survey, we could still get information to everybody in the district through a newsletter to every mailbox in the district, and then conduct the listening sessions and move forward. So just so that we're all clear as a board that if we're now deciding to say, we want to make sure that the community isn't interested in this third property or the second property, and that will be at a cost of about 6 weeks worth of time. So, and that's $1.5 million or so.
Do you have an alternate suggestion?
An alternate suggestion? My suggestion would be to schedule the meeting of the electors as soon as viable to engage with the community in listening sessions. And to schedule that meeting of the electors, putting the site on county DR as the question that we ask again. I wouldn't revisit BNS, I would put that one property before them. We've already gone down the path where we asked for approval of electors on BNS. We've had several rounds of cost calculations for all of these properties. BNS property is more expensive than the DR property, about $500,000 or $600,000. I find it, it's hard for us to claim that we're going to be cost conscious on one hand and then investigate a property that could cost $600,000 more, $500,000 to $600,000 more to the taxpayers and bring that forward to them. But we're a board of 9 and I'm willing to entertain, if we feel as a board that we should go and try to identify a second property and then survey about it, as a board, if that's what we feel is worth the time and the money to do, that's what we'll do. But I wouldn't do it. I would move forward as quickly as we possibly could, schedule the meeting of the electors concurrently, do the community listening sessions, have informational newsletter sent out to all the district mailboxes, and then see what happens.
My concern with that, and the reason I bring it up is because moving forward as fast as we possibly can is, I think, what caused the county DR property to get shot down in the first place. Like, I feel like we need to take the time to engage and make sure if we're saying we're gonna go to the electors one time and then it's one and done, I'm worried by pushing forward as fast as we can, we don't give the community time to be engaged and to share their feedback, and it's gonna be done, we're building on the existing site.
Tell me about where we went wrong with the speed to bring DR forward.
Well, the feedback I got as part of the election process was that it seemed like everything was being pushed forward as quickly as possible. And again, it's because there were the deadlines, right? I'm not placing blame anywhere. I'm just worried if it appears that we're going too fast again without engaging the community, that we're going to get a no matter how much we try to convince people that we're doing what's in the best interest of the community.
To follow up on what Rich said, though, we did 2 listening sessions, and what would you do different? Like, what would we do different that's what's not as rushed? I think that's what you're asking, right? So what would we do different?
I think just taking the time to do like the survey so we can actually get feedback, and putting exactly what we spent the last hour talking about.
So we did 2 listening sessions prior
But
to the
again,
DR?
it's a board of 9, so.
Right, yeah, but I'm asking, what else would you do? Was 2 listening sessions enough? Would you do more tours, or what? So we'll have this discussion here soon. What would we do different? Besides the survey, or just the survey?
I think just the survey and the listening sessions and getting that feedback, quantitative, feedback, why?
That way
You know.
we can tailor the listening sessions.
Yes.
To what people's concerns are.
Teresa, I'd be curious your take on this too. I got 2 questions. What are you thinking? What would you do?
As far as, what do you mean?
Well, Rich is suggesting an alternative to what I'm suggesting, and I'm not saying pick a side, but I'm curious what your perspective is.
I'm just trying to think ahead. So you're suggesting a community survey with all 3 sites? Or with two different sites? And so you're asking what's my opinion between the 2 sites and DR?
Or just, what's your opinion on the approach forward?
I think it's really important that we engage community. I think if we engage as many stakeholders as we can, we're gonna get some good feedback. I think a survey is important because I think there's, I wasn't sure how I felt, but I feel like if that's going to help us get some information. My concern with doing a survey without having some good information out there is that people will do it based on false information. Right? And so then, it's important to me that the information we get back is actually accurate and representative, right? Because it's based on, and so I think if we include all that right information, that's important. I'm probably have less strong feelings about the site. I want to be fiscally responsible, so to know that one site is going to cost us more, I'm having a hard time, I'm a little with Rich, justifying that. But I also think it's that's one person, so what's the community, where's the community at, and if that's really important to them. And I think I know Rich said it took costs to the taxpayers, it's not an additional, I want to just clarify, it's not an additional cost to the taxpayers, the cost is the cost. The referendum's a referendum, we're not exceeding that. So if we spend more at a building,
Less of something.
what happens is our students, right, the building gets less if we spend more on that stuff. So it's not an additional cost to the taxpayer.
Right.
So, but that concerns me. So that's kind of where I'm at.
But if it ends up being the existing site, then the cost is kind of neutral. If they vote against both the other sites,
It's still costing the same amount of money, right?
It's still
costing the same amount of
right.
money.
For 30 fewer acres?
And so that concerns me, right?
But for less acreage,
We
yes.
have less
Half the-
stuff, half the site for our kids, it costs as much, and their kids are gonna be on a construction site essentially for 2 years. That concerns me. So I have some concerns definitely about that. And you mentioned, and I didn't get a chance to ask, the idea of partnering with some other places like BTC, and I don't know their perception, but I would think that a bigger campus would be more conducive to something like that. And I don't know that, I'm just conjecturing, but that's kind of what's running through my head.
That's a lot of stuff.
And Rich, I completely appreciate what you're saying. I think where I'm getting stuck in my head is the volume of the turnout for the first meeting versus the second. And so I've had people say, you know, would you consider bringing back 31st? And I guess I would sleep better knowing if the results still point us in one direction or the other, but I don't feel like there was enough people represented to vote 31st compared to the second vote on Donnie. I mean, what was it,
Oh, sure,
100
very
people
different.
versus 1,700 came, right? I would feel better, and I know it's cost, but again, I want that called out in the survey. I want people to be able to see in this survey, like, this is the overall cost, because I appreciate this is all laid out, but this is hard for me to read, so I can imagine this has been hard for you guys too, right? So like, this now needs to have those three, existing site and Donnie and BNS on the survey spelled out, so people can be like, oh, yeah, I know Donnie was more, but I guess it really is less, because they don't believe it, because they still can't see it. And so I feel like if that's clear, and then we do listening sessions and engage the community and ask, what are you thinking? What are you seeing? What do you want? What are your, and I think we just need people to feel heard. And then I think we can go forward. And then I think it is hurry up and go time, because we are wasting money. I mean, we know that. We know that. But I do think we need to do this due diligence. I feel like we'll get more involvement in a positive light from our community if we can do this step. That's
Yeah.
just my take.
And I'm not trying to shortcut the due diligence, and I think it's incredibly important that, we take the time to do that, and folks need to look at the possible site through a lens of an 80 to 100 year planning cycle, right? I can't justify to me that building on the current site is what's in the best interests of our community and our kids, because it doesn't provide us with the space to expand, it doesn't provide us with opportunities that would be there with our technical college partners if we had the space to co-locate and share facilities with them. And in 20 years, when we're looking at what we need to do for our facilities, the intention is to design this building from the beginning to be expandable, to get to a point where I think that, there's benefits in having a 712 building, but I don't think that we could get there and the community didn't support it. If in the future that makes sense, the ability to expand into a 712 is built into this design. There are accommodations for, electrical and HVAC that's stubbed out. Plans, you can plan the expansion but not build it. I think that all of those things are afforded on the new site we wouldn't get on the current site. So, while, willing to entertain spending a little bit more time on this, it's gonna cost opportunities and space in the building for our kids, so. Okay. So, you have direction from the board fig to?
Yep, so I will re-engage with BNS, I will re-engage with, school perceptions, re-engage with CG, and we're gonna really push hard to try to keep that spring 24 date, so our costs don't escalate. But the reality is, time is time, we can't, once we lose it, we can't make it up, so.
The meeting with Allison, we could do that as a special board meeting. We could do that as an all Zoom meeting if we need to. We want to re-engage with her just so that board members have an opportunity to
Corals
have.
and Brady.
Yes, Allison at Corals and Brady, just so board members have an opportunity to have an interactive discussion with her. I heard that we want that to be gating to the survey, so that it can be clearly explained in the survey, if we build on the current site, that the entire footprint has to be torn down. And so that's a question that we want verification on.
One thing, if I could add a suggestion, I think to Teresa's point, I don't think we need to wait start community engagement. I think we can get rolling on the survey and start our community engagement plan simultaneously.
100%.
Yes.
I agree. That's true.
I don't know if we need to be directed or if that's a board, we need to figure out our own roles in that or whatever, but even just the boiled down version of what the case is for each property and what the case, I mean, the cons essentially of building on the existing site, like, we can start that tomorrow.
That's true.
Facebook, I mean, newsletter, whatever, like that doesn't need to wait. And so I don't know what we need to do tactically as a board to establish that, but
I think it has to wait a little bit till we talk to the woman to make sure we have to demo the whole high school. Because we can't talk about that property, I mean, in its entirety without knowing the answer to
Okay.
that.
maybe not tomorrow.
So I need,
But soon, but
Yeah.
sooner
Than the
after
survey,
phone call.
100%.
we need at least 24 hours advance notice to call a special board meeting, so I will engage with her tomorrow as well. And if possible, I'll try to get her to we'll do a special board meeting and I'll try to get her to Zoom in
Okay.
later this week.
Perfect.
So, to your comment too, I would love to have a little extra help in this timeframe. Because we're looking at re-engaging with the property, we're looking at the survey, we're looking at communications, we're looking at, those are all things that were done over the period of almost a year previous to the referendum, and we're gonna do them,
In a week.
yeah.
We'll help you.
One item, and thanks Nikki for reminding me, we did also, some of the feedback on the DR property was that it's too close to the airport. How can we build there? So FIG engaged with the Federal Aviation Administration, and we had an aviation study completed, and building on the DR property poses no hazard to aviation. From the FAA, they have told us we can build a building as high as 65 feet, I believe, and it poses no hazards to aviation.
It could be higher than that, just because it had to encompass the lights for the stadium, so.
But still no hazard to aviation.
Correct, no hazard to air travel, correct.
All right.
Rich, is that letter available to the public?
We'll put this stuff up on the website, that I can do without the board's help.
So that'll be released to the public so that they can view it if they like. Is there anything else you need from us tonight, Fig?
Please no.
Please no. Yeah, so, obviously we appreciate the administration's efforts, acknowledging, I think, Mike makes a good point several times that, and we're going out of our way to be overly transparent. We're sharing a lot more, especially during this meeting, than we would normally share with the public, because we're trying to make sure that folks are, now that they're engaged, that they're very informed. So I appreciate the dialogue with all of the board members. It's been very helpful. It was a robust discussion, and I think our community will benefit from it. So. All right. Yep.
No, I could see it. I think maybe it was just stand up.
Okay, so moving on to boardsmanship, administration. I've got a reminder, Monroe High School graduation is Sunday, May 28th. That's this coming Sunday at 1:30 p.m. So congratulations to all of our graduates. And I believe we have Nikki and is it Phil?
Yeah.
Nikki and Phil will be there at the commencement
Handing out the diplomas.
to hand out diplomas. So thanks for doing that, guys, and congratulations to all of our new graduates. We've got a note in here to discuss the proposed data retreat. Fig, do you have anything that you want to walk through?
Yeah, so we're having difficulty getting dates at work with everybody, so I would like the board, we didn't send out the doodle yet, because of a lot of the other stuff that's going on, but, so the board, I will get something out to you. We're looking at potentially July 12th, July 18th, or July 19th, and that would be like more of a deep dive on the data, and that would be starting at 5:30 p.m.
That's academic performance data.
Correct.
Say the dates again.
July 12, July 18, July 19.
So the 12th, I'm gone.
18. So when?
We'll do it.
So we'll do it.
Cindy's gonna do a doodle, and then what's the,
I thought we already
how,
did.
How long is,
Did you just
We
send
did for
out
that one.
preliminary dates? I already had these dates in my head for some reason.
I don't think we sent this doodle out, did we?
No, we haven't sent the doodle out.
So
But no, did you have it in one of these and just say like these are?
I
the
might
dates
have had
we're
it in the
thinking?
update
Okay,
that you
'cause
read.
I remember talking about this,
Yeah.
okay.
and this would still be a 5:30 start?
5:30 start, yeah.
And what do you expect for time?
I would anticipate between 3.5 and 4 hours.
Okay,
So a normal board meeting.
yeah. We'll provide sustenance for folks participating, please.
Yes, we will, I'll find some way to feed in.
Okay, so watch for that poll, and respond quickly as you can, please. Go to committee reports, so we'll go around the horn. Anything from you, Mike? Eric?
Had the opportunity to hand out scholarships with you and Nikki.
Yeah.
That was
$26,000 to 70 deserving students, and that was great. And it's amazing. I know Ron Spielman gave a nice speech about how our community supports, has, forward-looking and planting trees that they'll never sit in the shade of, and it was great. Great night.
Dylan? Thank you.
No.
Teresa?
I just want to say congratulations to Xander Slack and Jack Bochar, who both received Jerry Awards. I think that was really exciting. We have a lot of great things happening, and so I don't know how to bring some of those up, but I made some notes. I think we had a number of teachers nominated for Crystal Apple nominations. That was exciting. We had our Badger Conference Top Scholars dinner for our top scholars. That was exciting. A huge kudos to our district music staff right now as they're in concert season. I know they are doing a ton of work and they do a fantastic job across the district. So our music teachers are phenomenal. Congratulations to Sherry Hendrickson, who received a Legacy Award. And then our launch showcase is this coming Wednesday from 4 to 6:30. So if that's not on your calendars.
Is that at the
Oh,
M room?
4:30 to 6:30.
Is that at the M room,
Yes.
Teresa? M room? Okay, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Teresa. Phil?
Finance met prior to the board meeting tonight. Financials were reviewed, and a motion to move the furniture purchase at Northside Elementary to full board for approval tonight.
Terry?
Nothing.
Jim?
Maybe just a quick note, so, there's a meeting, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, the Greene County Board kind of had a decision in front of them to name January Pride Month. And I think, or,
Not
sorry, June, my apologies. From what I understand, several former students, maybe even some current students and some faculty showed up in support to ensure that everybody feels safe and welcome in Monroe and in Greene County, and just want to applaud the student activism, the alumni activism, and the staff for being courageous and showing up.
Thank you, Jim. Agenda items for future discussion from board members. Liaison reports, I don't see anybody from MEA or Mass, haven't heard from them. 5 minutes for the press. I think Adam had a coughing fit. Okay. So at 9:58, I'd entertain one final motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Terry, second by Nikki. By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're